Hello everybody. Check if everything's alright. Seems pretty clear. Not too bad. Hello everybody. Pretty good. Pretty good. So let's start the show. So, hello everybody. Okay, so let's go here. Hey, welcome everyone. This is the Shortwave radio show, live from YouTube Live, from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. My name is Gilles, and today we're going to talk about, of course, Shortwave radio as usual. This show is every 2 weeks on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 2000 hours Universal Time. And we talk about everything shortwave. Today's show where we're going to talk about the solar cycle. Because the solar cycle has a big impact on shortwave propagation. And many newbies that come to the hobby, pretty much every newbie that comes to the hobby, has no idea that the sun plays such a big role in propagation of shortwave signals. For one, I remember when I was, one of the stories that a lot of people find funny is when I started listening to shortwave when I was about 13, 14 years old, I had no idea that the sun had an impact on shortwave. And basically, some days I turned on the radio and there were no signals or signals were weak. And I always thought that my antenna must have been broken. So I would go out and take out the antenna and do another antenna. And it's like, well, something's wrong. Until someday I learned that, the solar cycle plays a big role in propagation. So understanding why one day there's nothing on the bands, or it's very weak, or versus another day. And we will also mix in with the solar cycle a little more information about the seasonal effects that the sun and the earth have on shortwave propagation. Depending on the season where winter, summer, and so on, it's not the same thing, and that's why stations change schedule twice a year. So I think it's going to be cool, and of course, if we have some time, and we probably will, I'll be answering some questions, and hope that you guys like our show. For those that didn't see yet, I've released the January favorite frequency list in PDF. So check the channel for the video. You click the link for the PDF, and basically you will have access to this PDF file that you can download and share with everybody. And once again, if you enjoy what I do, on the list there's a PayPal email address. Why not, if you want, give me a little donation. Really appreciates. I take a lot of time and make a lot of efforts in making the list and making the videos and doing the live shows. It's much appreciated. Thank you for everybody that donated, by the way, and hope that we have a great 2017. Happy New Year to those that I haven't seen yesterday in the Tuning the Band show. It's another year once again. It's just amazing how time flies. We're in 2017. We were talking at the Christmas time with friends and family how we were, we still remember when we were going crazy at, the year 2000 would arrive, and, the Y2K hysteria, if you want, of everybody thinking that in the year 2000, every computer in the world will explode or something. And basically we went through it and was fine. And, we're 17 years later now, 2017. Incredible when you think about it. So, hey, everyone. Hello, PLF. Nice to have you on board. Scotty TR6 from sunny Toronto. Here it's sunny Montreal. A little cold, -10 around. By the way, if you want to know what's the delay on the show, on the live stream, this is a clock that is exactly 2 seconds in UTC time. So it's 20:05 and 21 seconds UTC. It's on the dot. I always make sure that it's perfectly synchronized every time I do the show, and hope that everybody will enjoy today's show. So, what else? Okay, on the YouTube chat, we have AA5HL. Hello there. Nice to see you on board. Nick Amendot says 10 seconds delay. Nick is from Romania. Nice to have you on board. Gerald DeCare says that you use the Dropbox app and it opens great. Cool. And should open also with if you have a PDF reader of some sort on the PC. Gordon Foster, hello there. 10-second delay also. Bobby Burgess, nice to have you on board. And that's always cool. Martin Herrera, greetings from the city of Pachuca in Mexico. Hello there, Mexico. Nice to have somebody from Mexico on board. And I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And it's fun to do this show, of course. MDK2, nice to have you on board. Gerald is sharing right now the solar flux 71. That's very low, and you'll understand. We'll talk about that in the show today. K index is 4. That means geomagnetic field is active. It's not storm level. We expect storm level this weekend, so don't panic if your receiver doesn't get as many signals. We're in a solar wind right now coming from a coronal hole on the sun. That will impact shortwave propagation for the next 2 or 3 days. So, we have a lot of these recently. Neil Toombs, hello there. Nice to have you on board. DB, could you explain what all the radios are, each one? Also, where you're located. So I'm in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And I'll do a little tour of the radios. No problem. It's something that I don't really do much, and why not? Before we start talking about it, we'll do a little tour here. Okay, Vanue Deoto, hello there from the Netherlands. PA0020SWL is shortwave handle. PD0PMS, hello there from the Netherlands. Bonjour, ça va bien, Gordon Foster. KC9QUH from Bloomington, Indiana. Pretty cool. Always fun when everybody says hi for the first time. Just remind me of where you're located. Some of you that have been regulars for a long time, I know where you are, but some of you I sometimes don't remember where you are all the time. JST300Z, hello there. That's the best way, getting a text message to know when I'm live. That's the best thing, right now. Gerald DeCare says, nice list. Thank you very much. Hopefully you guys in Europe enjoy the fact that I started doing a little part for European broadcasts, and that's going to grow. Also, I'll add utility signals received in Europe. So give me time. I do that in my spare time. And spare time is something I have not that much of. So I try to do my best. Calvin, 29-0, nice to have you here. Bullfrog, 89. Nice to have you here. iMapper from Moscow, Russia. Nice to have you here. DX from Holland. Hello there. And what else do we have? Bullfrog 89 says the lower part of 6 meters is absolutely packed. So, that's interesting. Very interesting to see all of that. 9 seconds delay in Moscow, apparently. Dante Fazio, nice to have you here. Thomas Brogan, hello there from Scotland. Dante Fazio is from Connecticut. Cool. Nice to have you here. So, hey, Calvin29. Yeah, DX is in the living room. Actually, I was in the living room with my GP5. I used a Windows tablet, and I was decoding. There's a radio teletype contest this weekend. I was actually using this GP5 and decoding radio teletype on my little Windows tablet. It was kind of cool. I wanted to make a video but didn't have time. I'm going to make one a little later on. It was going to be cool. Nissan Greenwich from Dublin. Hello there. Alex Canavos from Tennessee. Cool. Nice to see everybody here. Cian's Crit... and CEN Crit Teach or something like that. Sorry. Ireland. I don't know how you want me to pronounce it. It's it's a username. So L Hutchison, hello there from the UK. Nice to have you on board. And do I have any Motorola two-way radios? No, I did have one, a Motorola a radio for the. It was made for business that you put in a car, a mobile one. But it's been gone a long time. I sold it on eBay a long, long time ago. Christophe Bucksteel, nice hello there from Belgium. Pretty cool. Bonne année. And hope everybody is. So okay, well I'll call you Owen, my friend. I'll call you Owen. Brian Miller from Detroit, Michigan. Hello there. What's your call, Dante Fazio, from for your amateur radio operator call? I always like to give the call on the air. It's fun because if anybody of you contact each other, at least you know that you've met somewhere. SG1 East Nebraska, 23 Fahrenheit and sunny over there. Pretty cool. Shortwave Larry says he's from Athens, New York. So hey Larry, nice to have you here. 16 seconds delay says PLF. 11 seconds in Toronto from Scotty Tier 6. It's really nice to have everybody here. And really, really cool. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show. So that's going to be really cool. Rick Robbins, hello there. JST300Z says, put your finger in the middle of Pennsylvania on the map. That's me. So pretty cool. Pretty cool. Nice to have everybody here. Did Santa bring any radios? Yes, Santa thanks to CountyCom, brought me a GP5 SSB. Which I have been enjoying and having a lot of fun with. This is an amazing little radio for the package. Really enjoyed this little thing. So yeah, Santa brought me this, and really nice receiver from CountyCom, GP5 SSB. Really, really nice, and really enjoying. If you guys see that there's a little bit of sunshine getting through, sorry about that, but I got a little problem with the. I'm going to try to see if I can do something about that. We'll try to have the least possible. I got some problems with that because of the Christmas lights. The Christmas lights are kind of doing a little opening the horizontal store here with Anyways, okay. What else we have here? Yeah, pretty cool. Bassett Rahman, hello from Pakistan, AP2FLY. Wow, nice to have Pakistan. I think it's, I'm not sure, I think it's the first time we have Pakistan on our radio show. Pretty cool. Gordon Foster is from County Durham, Northeast England. Really nice. 2.5 megahertz is not something I'm going to hear anything at right now because it's still afternoon here. Sun is still an hour and a half away from setting. I won't hear anything there. Yes, I did see a lot of things about that. Gerald's talking about spacewalk for the International Space Station. That's always fun. Next Friday at 7 a.m. It's fun to see that. What else do we have? Nice to have Matthew Wells. You have a CB video. I'm in Leeds, Alabama. Hello there, Matthew Wells from Alabama. Cool. Jeffrey Kropp from Canahan, New Hampshire. Nice to have you here. Pretty cool. Lots of people, and it's really fun. Hey, Rened X, or nice to have you here. Well, I don't know if you're watching live, but if you are. Hello there, Driver Films Shortwave. Good evening. Nice to have you here. Pretty cool. We're having a nice crowd today. Okay. If I go through a little bit the radios, because I've been asked that, and I think it's something nice. Hello there, Carol T. KF7ELY from the state of Oregon, I believe. In the west side of the United States anyways. And so here's the radio roundup here, because I think it's going to be cool to see and have a little roundup of this. Okay, we start from that side. The three radios you see here are all American 5s. These are tube receivers from the 50s, 60s, plastic type. So this one is a clock RCA Victor. This is a Fleetwood. And that one's an Admiral, all made in Montreal. Believe it or not, this is amazing. You know that time when we used to make things here instead of in China? This one, Degen DE13, little portable emergency radio, hand crank, solar powered, recharges an internal battery, has AM, FM, shortwave. Really, really nice little radio here. I took out this one, which looks a little ugly because it's like full of dust that's stuck to it, but this is a Ethon receiver, nice little receiver that's pretty cool. I'm gonna do a few videos. Haven't done a video about this a long time ago. If we continue on, so here is my favorite portable, wideband receiver, the ICOM ICR20. Amazing little radio, 100 kilohertz all the way up, 150 kilohertz all the way up to 3.3 gigahertz. No cuts in the bands. This is a good old trusty Pro 43 scanner. Bought that many years ago. For a long time, this has been my main radio for VHF, UHF. Of course, the Conticom GP5 SSB. Shortwave, AM, FM, and longwave. CB radio, a realistic TRC 432, 40 channels. Got that, I was about 14 years old. My first shortwave receiver here, the DX100. Got that, I was 13 years old. That is what started what I'm doing today. Really a big passion towards shortwave radio and radio in general. A Realistic Pro 2006, another great little receiver. This is one of the radios that I bought 20-something years ago, around 25 years ago. And this is, of course, a 400-channel scanner radio, VHF, UHF bands. And if we go up to the left side, we have my main receiver, which is an ICOM ICR 8500. And I've got a little bit of radios here, like I've got here a Degen DE15. Very thin, nice little radio. This is one of the cool little things for 20 bucks. The Texan R9012. If you're looking for a really inexpensive analog radio for shortwave that receives, this little thing is not even 20 bucks, and wow, just amazing. So I think I've mentioned pretty much everything that was on my desk. And that's pretty much the radios that I have here. But I have tons of radios over there in the shelf. For those that watch my VHF show, I usually am over there instead of over here. And pretty cool to talk about these radio. How much did that first ICOM communications receiver portable? I got it for $500. $500 Canadian dollars, which was, and today's price, at this price, it's about, in the US, it's about, I don't know, 425. It's a little more expensive though. So, but I did pay it was on sale at $4.49 or something like that, and I jumped on the occasion to buy it. Oregon. So yeah, as long as we know where you are, Carol, and we understand what I'm saying. Oregon, something like that. So the beige radio has a call sign on it. Is that a sticker or some kind of promo radio? Hey, David Arden, nice to have you here. Yeah, that radio, from what I understood, from the person who I purchased it, was a radio that the station CKVL is an old medium wave station that existed on 850 kilohertz AM, and it stopped somewhere in the late 80s or early 90s. For the 60s and 70s, CKVL was one of the most popular talk station in Montreal, French language. They had a contest in the 60s where they actually gave away some of these. And this, apparently, from what I understand, comes from the promotion that they did back in the 60s. So, pretty cool. Hey, Mr. Roman, nice to have you on board from the state of Washington. Yeah, Thomas Brogan, Radio Australia. I mean, once again, just got to say one thing. Listen to Radio Australia as much as you can. They're leaving the shortwave bands on January 31st, unfortunately. It does seem that they're not going to change anything. So it's really, really sad. Yep, bought it brand new. Brand new at around $500. It's discontinued, so you can't have an R20 anymore, except for maybe a used one. Bullfrog89 says the 912 is one of my favorite radios, perfect for beginner and portable. Yep. And it's not expensive. So it's not expensive. David Arden has a Pro 43 as well. It's a pretty good scanner. The Pro 43 portable is a pretty good one. I used to listen to airband communication, but mostly military communications. When there was a big air base in Plattsburgh, New York, the U.S. Air Force had a really big air base there. I could listen in on the communications when the plane were in the air. I could listen in to the communication and exercises they would do. I really, really miss that since they closed down the air base when they started, kind of reducing the size of the U.S. Air Force in the United States. And I started at 2000 hours UTC, my friend. Hey, Paul Breck. Nice to have you on board from G7 EWS from England. Pretty cool. And I've covered that a few times in December. That Radio Australia is unfortunately, getting off the air around. Here it goes. I think it's okay. So Radio Australia leaving their airwaves. That's going to be missed. That was my morning listening. I mean, everybody in North America, I think, that has shortwave for a while, listened to Radio Australia in the morning. It was like, that morning coffee listening, Radio Australia. It was so cool. Packed a really amazing signal here in Montreal and throughout North America. 9580 kilohertz was amazingly good. It's really, really sad that they're going and they're leaving the bands. From what I understand, both these receivers, the ICR20 PLF is replaced by the ICR30, which will be the new one coming soon. And the ICR 8500 here is replaced by the ICR 8600, also coming soon in 2017. So, if they make new receivers, it means they're selling enough that it's still worth it to make some new receivers, and that's pretty good. And today's beer is Boreal Cuivré. Pretty good beer. And that's my beer for today. So, MDK2, they're making the ICOM ICR30. That's still not available, but should be available soon. Bullfrog is in North New York State, not very far from here. And Dente Fazio says, snowing over 10 inches in Connecticut. Yeah, you guys on the East Coast are going to have like this winter storm from what I've seen. We had like 3 snowstorms in a row, so now we're having more of a cool or cold weather. We're going to drop to like minus 20 in the next few days. It's almost minus 10 right now, Celsius. So it's pretty cool. Evan McRoberts, hello there. Good afternoon. And nice to have you here. And yeah, same beer as yesterday, Bobby. It's actually, what I do is I buy a 6-pack because I typically drink 3 beers during a show, about 1 an hour. So I buy a 6-pack, and I know what I'm going to do yesterday and today with 3 beers each. Question of not being drunk. For those of you that follow me on the Windows channel, you should have seen a drunk Santa at some point. Philip Briggs from Brazil, hello there. Nice to have you on board. And Jeffrey Kropp says, no snow here yet. A few inches predicted. So, nice. Hello, everybody. We're having a great gang, by the way, today. We're at 50 live viewers right now. It's pretty nice. So, that's okay, Bobby. You know what? You don't have to drink. It's I enjoy beer. I do enjoy having a few beers. And that's something that, doing something nice. I'm a social drinker. So I like drinking when there's people around. So I'm considering that this is like people around. I'm going to just go check something because it's annoying me that there's something in the... I don't know if I can do anything about it. There's this unfortunate sun in the camera, which I hate. So we're going to try to do our best. So, okay. Oh, I've never heard Wolverine when he gets on live as a drunken DJ. Wow. Man, that must be something. He was on at this past New Year's Eve. Wow, that must be something. Got to tell you that. And I'm not surprised. Pirate radio is pirate radio. It's just cool. Gordon Foster drinking rum and coke. That's good. Pretty good, actually. So, and Driver Film Shortwave is going to drink whiskey. Whoa. Hey, Heron. Heron from Wales. Heron, will.i.am. Nice to have you here. Philip from Belgium. Hello there, Philip. Bienvenue. And it's fun to have everybody here. Okay. Simple Electricity. Nice to have you on board from the Czech Republic. Really a nice gang. We're covering the map pretty much. Pretty nice. So, N5XDC, hello there, Scott in Virginia. Did I talk about the old clock radio yet? Well, I did a big tour of the radios, but no, not. I haven't. These are all American 5-tube receivers, and they're nice little receivers. They all work, by the way. If I plug them in and listen, they all work. Or they're AM only radios, by the way. So yeah. We don't think about these things. N5XTC says, love those. Should have got my grandpa's when he died. Did not think about it. Yeah, it's not something we think about, really. Yep, did, of course, made the headlines, the shooting in the Florida airport, unfortunately. And Alex Canavas says, with the way today's going, coffee now, beer later. Pretty good. Paulo's Records, hello there from London, UK. TOT, nice to have you here. Don't worry about it. He was shoveling snow. We had our part of shoveling snow here. So, yeah, it is crazy. So, yep, those receivers are great. And I got, like about 20 of these. Next show, I'll change them. I'll change them with others that I have so you guys see the different ones I have. So, well, that's the worst thing, Scott, is that like these radios come from an old woman that was selling them at a church, kind of a church garage sale or some sort, and she was selling me those for like $2, $3, and some of them didn't work, but usually it was just changing the tubes and it was okay. So. And it's snowing heavily in Oregon, and there's 25 inches on the ground. That's a lot, more than here. Here we have some on the ground, but I'd say we have about 10 inches on the ground, 10 to 12 inches. So Wow, Gerald heard the shooting on the Scanner Radio Pro. Nice. Is there any NOAA weather stations where you live? Yeah, well, we have two. The clock work on it. The light. Yeah, the clock does work. Yep. It's just that it's not plugged in, but the clock does work. Yes, and it's even you can even set it up to wake you up. With a very nice way of doing it. Yeah, I receive here in Canada. We have an equivalency to the NOAA weather stations, which is the Environment Canada station. So this one is Environment Canada.
Normal pour la période, minimum.
Now it's in French. Now 162.55 megahertz. But I do hear also the US one from Burlington, Vermont, on 162.400.
Chance of precipitation 90%. Wednesday and Wednesday night, mostly cloudy.
Coming in pretty well. So, yep, we have. It's pretty nice. Carol, last time I heard a pirate rebroadcast my show was. I believe part of my show was broadcast on the Christmas. On Christmas, somebody told me on the special Christmas show what was broadcast on 6925 apparently, but there was no propagation here at all. So basically, I haven't heard anybody broadcast my own my show since then. But you know what? We're gonna do another pirate show in a few weeks, and hopefully we'll have another live feed, and I think it's going to be fun. So pretty cool. MDK2 says, funny, someone asked about weather radio in Montreal. When I was 13, my family took an RV vacation east, and we actually stopped a day in Montreal. I had brought along a 3 weather frequency radio. Oh, that's cool. From Radio Shack, and I remember finding the French language on one of the 3. Yeah, it's actually bilingual. It's it alternates French and English all the time. And Mr. Roman says, I see you have some old shortwave radios there. I see them at yard sales, old for cheap. Are they worth buying? If you get them for cheap, and if you enjoy having old radios. But remember that old receivers, if you have tube receivers, old tube receivers might need maintenance. I'd say that from experience, about 1 in 2 receivers that I bought either didn't work or worked badly, and you have to actually fix them. But it's, I enjoy having those, and even if they don't work, I'll purchase one. But I'm the guy that goes, I'm cheap on the older radios. I don't want to pay. So if you sell me for $5, I'll take it for $5 or $10. I will not take it above $10 unless it's a really amazing radio. There are some old radios that are really amazing and cool. So sometimes I will, but Scotty Tier 6 says he stopped in the radio world yesterday. They still have no info on exactly how much the R8600 will cost. Yeah, I'm guessing somebody told me around $3,000 the R86. So we'll see when it arrives. Scotty Tier 6 says he has a Victor R32 floor standing radio from 1929 that I bought in the early 70s at my grandmother's church rummage sale for $5 and still works. Wow, that's a great. It's fun to have these great radios, those big, floor radios. Really cool. And he says that Dixie, his radio cat, is parked on the warm power supply corner of his RA9500. Richard in Atlanta, Georgia. Hello there. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on board. And hey, Florin SSL back. Thank you. 1 year older. Yeah. Well, we all get older. And Yeah, well, I'm not gonna check much signals. Dante Fazio. Today's not the it's not the radio listening show, but I have a trunk tracker radio, and there's also the GMRS stuff. I have some GMRS transceivers, also portable. David Harden, what type of VHF antenna do you have? I have a mobile vertical, and it's on a top of the metal shed that is on the third floor here, and it actually is over the rooftop, so it gives me amazing reception on VHF, UHF. Eventually, when I get the cash, I want to change that for a discount. But you know what? It's been pretty amazing. Pretty amazing what I received with that little antenna that I paid 99 cents. And I should have bought more than one. I can tell you that. Should have bought like every mobile antenna they had when I got it. Theo T. Gilles, how's your antenna outside with the weather? Not bad, actually. We had, you know what? This year is a very weird year. Almost every snowstorm we had changes at some point to an ice storm. So we've had like 3 ice storms in 2 weeks. Starts with like, 10, 15 centimeters of snow. Then we have a period of ice, and basically freezing rain. So my wire 3 times in the past 2 weeks around was covered with a thick layer of ice that, of course, melted at some point. But everything's holding, everything's going well. And so let's cross our fingers that it's okay. That's for sure. Cheers, everyone. Gerald says, Gilles is cheap on radios, but big spender on beer. Yeah, you got to have beer when you listen to radio. Bobby Burgess says, usually does not happen all day, but at night, sometimes my GPX R616W can capture a signal. But every once a while, something comes in and knocks the audible out, and then it returns to normal and comes in a loop. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if you're not having some kind of I'd like to hear exactly what happens. I've seen some receivers. I don't know much about the GPX R616W, but I know that some cheaper receivers sometimes overload with signals, and maybe there's something overloading the radio, and that's what you're having. Hello there, Fred. He has shortwave memory. So, hello there, D-Raf from Kingston, New York. Brett Wayne, KC2NXP from Western New York. Nice to have you here. And Mr. Roman says, I met a guy who have vintage Alleycrafters SX25, but the damn thing is bulky. He knows me, shows me it works. Any worth trying to get it? It's cool looking though. The Alleycrafters are amazing receivers. If you can get it for not too expensive of an amount, you should. Alleycrafters SX25 and all of these radios are great. There's a flea market not very far from where I live, and there's a guy that has like at least 30 or 40 old radios. He's got the big cathedral radios that's on the floor. He's got Alleycrafters. He's got some great shortwave radios, I can tell you that. Hello, Art. What brand model camera I'm using for streaming? It's a Logitech C920 that can do up to 1080p HD. And actually, what's funny is I bought that. It's at least 3 years old now. And I was looking into maybe buying something new this year. And the funny thing is that when you look at all the reviews of HD cameras for streaming, it all comes down back to, even though this camera is old, it's still one of the best cameras you can buy today for streaming. So, I was looking at newer models, and I'm gonna stick with that. And it's now, I bought it when I bought it 3 years ago, it was like $140. Today you can get it for like 59 or 69 bucks, and it's an amazing little performer, I gotta say. Amazing camera. MDK2 says got an Airline 62315 from 1936. that my dad bought in a thrift store when he was in medical school. It has shortwave, 120 meters to 49 meters, and used to listen to WWV on it, but the shortwave doesn't work on it anymore. You know what? It's maybe something very, very easy to fix. These radios are not that hard to fix very, very often. I can tell you that. Hey, Grindle. Nice to have you here from Denver, Colorado. And cheers. Hello there, The Truth Hurts. Nice to have you on board. And it's pretty cool to see everybody here. So, Scotty TRC's got an SX25 Alley Crafters, and he says that it's a nice radio. So, one more reason why you should buy that radio. When it's not too expensive. You know, I almost, the guy had one Alley Crafters at the flea market, and he had a really nice one. He was selling it for $100, and I came this close to spending $100 and bring it home. You know, we turned it on there. It worked fine. It had shortwave bands, and I could see a big old shortwave radio here with all the radios I got. I think that'd be nice. So one day I'll go there and I'll say, okay, I'm getting something. That would be cool, I think. Skyrider Super Defiant. Yep, that's exactly what Mr. Roman says. Any antenna recommendations? I live in an apartment. Yeah, that's the worst. Living in an apartment in shortwave radio is one of the most challenging things you can do. You got to start out with testing it out with a piece of wire inside your room. If there's too much noise, a piece of wire that maybe hangs from a window or something, if possible. It really depends on all the electronics and what people have around you. Because some apartments are amazingly no noise. It all depends on what people have around you. So start with a piece of wire, and if you can, just hang it from from a window or something. Maybe it's gonna work. Okay. Really? Would it be expensive to fix? You know what you need, MDK2? You need someone that is, an old-timer repair guy that, that's like 60 years old, and he's going to look at it, and he's going to, there are things sometimes that you just have to redo yourself. For example, if there's one of the transformers in the radio that's, gone berserk, you just, sometimes you'll have to find a guy that is willing to look at the specs and and just rewire it himself. That's often something that happens. And do you have a regular supplier for radio tubes valves? They are difficult to source these days. You know what? What's sad is the fact that I had a very, very good supplier of tubes here. It was an old shop, and it was really, really close here. The guy was like, last time the guy was there, I think the guy was like 75 years old. And I would guess that either got sick or died or something. One day when I went there a few years ago, 2 years ago maybe, it closed down. And that was my main source of tubes. So now I do have a lot of tube replacements, because when I got there at one point, I got a good price, and he kind of gave me like a whole bunch of tubes. And so I do have replacements here. I have replacements for almost all my radios that I keep stored, and if I ever need them, I have them. But I gotta say, yep, it's harder and harder. And you know what? I think it's maybe one place where I still can get some is there's a place on Park Avenue here, Avenue du Parc. There's a radio shop there that has old radios. The guy still has tubes. I can go there also, basically. And but you know, it's mostly the you know, eBay today for tubes. But you know, they sell them with the price is way too high for tubes. I can tell you that. Gerald says he loves his Lafayette KT200. Wow. Just send me an email. Let me just check here. I don't have your email. I don't have your email, Carol. Sorry. Maybe send it back, or it's waiting. Hello there, DRC Antennas. Nice to have you on board. Yeah, I'd like that, Bobby. You can send it at officialshortwaveradio@gmail.com. And if you can't, you know, if you don't send it there, I don't mind. Send it to helpwithyourcomputers@gmail.com, the same email from the Windows channel. As long as you send me an email somewhere, I'll check it out, Bobby, and try to recreate the same problem. And I'll check it out, and I'll try to help you with that and see what we can do. Unfortunately, Scotty Tier 6 says 2 years ago was lucky to find a Racal RA17 at Amfest in St. Catharines for $350. Like new condition, amazing radio. There are several of them in the British Control Center. In the James Bond movie Dr. No. That's always cool when you see a movie that has radios that you own. This is always cool. I have a great local shop for parts and tubes called A1 Electronics. Amazing place for a radio geek. Oh, that's cool. 5 minutes away from where you live. That is cool. That is cool. What else do we have? Philip Briggs, when you live in England, a few of the old-timer radio guys close down due to extraordinary rents that are just too high. Same thing here. You know, most of the people that still have their own little shops here in town, that's because when they opened shop, they bought the building where the shop is. So that guy, for example, that was 75, he closed down because it was too old. Last time that I went there, it was his son that was like 50, 55 years old. And he managed to stay there because it was a 2-story building. And when he opened the shop, he had bought the building. So he didn't have rent because he owned the building. And on the second floor, there were 2 apartments. So he didn't have rent, and he had 2 apartments that gave rent to him. So, you know, most of the shops today... yeah, Bobby, any email. As long as you use an email, it's okay. So the guy, you know, most of these people bought the building that they opened the shop in, because nobody today can open a shop and live out of it now. Here, the rents for businesses are just way too high. You know, when I started my tech guy jobs, I did think about, you know, getting a space somewhere in a shop. But you know what? When I saw the rents, I just decided, okay, I'm going to operate from my own and turn one of the rooms into an office. So sometimes there are some people that come here and get their computer fixed here, but I prefer, and that's what I usually do, is I go to the client's home. And like that, by having my own office in my home, you know, it doesn't cost me a extremely high amount of money to operate. So MDK2 says, I'm hoping to learn some basic electronics and take a crack at it myself sometime in the future. Had learned some as a kid, but didn't stick with it. You know, it's surprising, MDK2, how these old receivers are not that difficult to fix. And there's a lot of old radio Fix's video on YouTube if you search. Carol would like to have a Sony CRF 320A. Yeah, it does look very cool, I gotta say. I know what you mean. I've seen that radio and wow. And yeah, that's possible. Always gives me a 50-50 guarantee. 50 feet or 50 seconds, whichever comes first. So, hey, we're going to talk about, we're almost at 60 live viewers right now. That's cool. We're going to take a look at, oh, I just got your email, Carol. And let me check that out. Oh, man. That is pretty snowy. Wow, that's really snowy. Looks cool though. You know, as long as you don't have to go out, always looks cool when it's snowing like that. Pretty cool. And Arthur Smith sending me a nice picture of his SX42 and S38 full restorations. These are nice receivers. I love these old radios. What nice radios. Oh man, I'm jealous. Wow, they are so clean too. You really take good care of these things. Wow, I'm jealous. I'm jealous. These are really nice. I gotta say. So MDK2 found the schematic for this radio online. It did look pretty simple, just a matter of finding the parts, especially the tubes. Yeah, finding the tubes. One of the major issues you have with old radios like these radios were, for the most part, built by hand. So basically, one of the things you have to be careful, it's easy to move something and to break something else. And that's probably the worst nightmare you will have with these radios is you decide that a lot of these, the main problem with most of these are the tubes that go bad and the capacitors that will wear out, because in that time they used paper capacitors. They kind of dry out at some point and they become no good, and you have to find suitable replacements with today's electrolytic capacitors to replace the ones in there, to fix them. That's the two main issues most of the time with these radios, and that's just fixing them. I have another clock radio like this that's in my storage here, and I fixed the radio. I changed 3 paper capacitors with electrolytic capacitors, and I got to say, the repair itself is not hard. It's trying to repair without breaking something else that's harder, I got to say. And Sir Roman says, I talked to my mom to see if I can find out what kind of shortwave radio my dad had for hurricane emergencies. She sent me a picture. Radio reads RCA brand Strato World model RJM68E6 6-band portable radio. Wow, was the coolest thing for me as a kid just to listen to that radio. Yeah, I gotta say, these are amazing receivers, for sure. Amazing receivers. Okay, so today we're going to talk about solar activity and its effect on shortwave propagation. It's something that a lot of newbies don't understand. Even among older shortwave listeners, it's not fully understood. Sorry. And what actually made me understand more of it is because I'm a big astronomy buff. I like, reading about space and the universe and the planets and everything. So of course, I also enjoyed reading a lot about the sun. So when I started listening to shortwave in 1982, I knew that, I already knew back then that there was a solar cycle because of my astronomy interest. But it hadn't come to me that shortwave radio and the sun would have such an impact. And it took a few years. I believe it was in some kind of DX show at some point, maybe in 85, 86, that they talked about solar cycle, the solar activity, and how it impacted shortwave. And that's where I understood finally why some days propagation was crappy and some days propagation was amazing. I, for some reason, never had done the link until then that the sun would play such a role in shortwave propagation. So basically, solar activity is something that happens naturally in the sun. There's a cycle of high and low periods of activity on the sun. The average time is 11 years, and that is an average, and that's very important to understand this. Too many people I've seen say, oh, next cycle will be that time, next cycle will be that year, next maximum will be in 2024. And I always, when I see that, I'm always, well, no, it's not exactly like that. Because it's an average, it means it can be shorter or longer depending on the solar cycle. Sorry. And to give you an idea, the longest solar cycle, the one that spread for the longest period of time, was 18 years. And the one that spread for the minimum amount of time, we had a 1 or 2 solar cycles that lasted only 6 years, from top to bottom, before it starts again. So it gives you an idea. A solar cycle can be really short, only 6 years, can be really long. Just to give you an idea, we are right now on what's called solar cycle 24. So where does that number come from, first of all, cycle 24? It starts from solar cycle number 1, which was the first ever recorded full solar cycle, and we go back pretty far back. The solar cycle, the interest in solar cycle started around 16 something when Galileo decided that he looked at the sun with his telescope, and he actually not blinded himself, but actually did suffer some eye damage because he looked at the sun with his telescope. Of course, he probably looked at it when it was very low, and he thought it was maybe safe to look at it. And it's never, by the way, safe to look at the sun, not even just with your eyes. It's never safe to look at the sun, and you never forget that. Even when the sun sets, don't stare at the sun too long. It's surprising how strong it still is, even though your eyes are capable of looking at it. And so the solar cycle started to be measured. So at that time, they didn't know anything about solar cycles, but they did notice that there were dark spots on the sun. And these are the sunspots. And at some point, somebody noticed, hey, the sunspots come and go with a 11-year cycle, or around 11-year cycle. And they noticed, oh, okay, that's interesting. But there is still no idea why sometimes there's sunspots and why sometimes the sun is kind of blank. So basically, as time went by, somebody said, hey, when we started to have more measures and more measurements of all of the output of the sun, and especially when we had radio technology that started, we started noticing, oh, look at that. The sun, when it's in solar maximum, is, well, when there's a lot of sunspots, seems to emit more noise on the radio frequencies, seems to even emit at different wavelengths more energy, including ultraviolet and extreme ultraviolet wavelengths. So basically, that's when they started seeing, okay, there's a cycle, and the cycle means that as the sun is in the bottom of the cycle, it's relatively quiet. It has very few sunspots. It doesn't have zero. Like, for example, a lot of people were talking about the Maunder minimum. The Maunder minimum is a very, very long period of time in the 1700s when the sun was relatively blank. But don't be fooled, because I've seen some people say, oh, the sun didn't have any cycles in that 50-year range. False. The sun did have cycles, and the sun did have sunspots. It's just that the series of cycles in that Maunder minimum were extremely small compared to everything else that they had measured until then. And they're talking about maybe we're getting into a Maunder minimum right now, because solar cycle 24 that we are in right now, we're in the descending phase. We're going at the bottom of this cycle right now. And we're getting close to that bottom. It's the smallest solar cycle for the past 100 years. The last time the sun was at such a small cycle that we have now was in 1906. That was the last time that the sunspots in the solar cycle were so small. And it was, in 1906, it was still stronger than today. So we haven't seen such a small cycle. And you know what? It is surprising, because anybody that listened to shortwave or is an amateur radio operator knows a little bit about the sun and the solar cycle. Well, since the 1950s, the sun has been extremely active. We had that extremely high solar cycle of 1957-58 that was so strong that even TV signals from Europe were almost coming in daily on people's black and white TVs at the time. And since then, the cycles were all very strong. When I got into shortwave with the DX100, I was lucky to be in the down part of what was the solar cycle maximum of 79-80. It was still very active. And all the cycles that we had until now were very, very strong. To give you guys an idea, solar cycle 24 right now, the highest solar flux I've heard was around 200. Okay? Solar flux is a measure of the output of the sun at 2.4 gigahertz. They actually listen to the sun. The more noise it emits at that frequency range, technically goes with the more energy the sun's output is. And they have a scale that's from 60 to 400, called the solar flux index. That is very, very useful if you're a shortwave listener. And it goes from 60 to 400. This cycle, the highest solar flux I've seen was like 200, 220. To give you an idea, solar cycle 23, I looked back in some of my notes, and we had solar flux index of 350. Much higher, much more output from the sun. And it has an impact. It has an impact on radio propagation. So that's pretty much what's happening. We have a solar cycle. It's an average of 11 years. And we're going to look at the chat a little more. And we're going to check more of the comments before we continue on. So, and if you're interested in astronomy, well, the sun is something very, very amazing, by the way, to study also, and it's fun to know what's happening. So what else do we have here? Hey, Joe Palu, hi, nice to have you on board. And what else do we have here? Please, no politics in the chat room. It's the worst. Talking about politics is the worst that you can do. And okay, let's just check it out here quite quickly. Hello, David in Barcelona, Spain. Nice to have you on board. And pretty cool to see you here. So yeah, true. I do need to make some videos with those tube radios and listen to the medium wave bands. I will. For sure. Hey, Richard, happy birthday. Richard Cook. Cookrick555 in the chat is his birthday today. Happy birthday, my friend. Hope you're having a great day. And Well, you're in the right place, Canadian merchant, because today is Solar Cycle Day, and we're going to talk about that a lot. So TOT says, old radios like Zenith with shortwave bands have country names on the bands. Why was that? Did the stations not move around as they do today? Confused about that. Well, a lot of the shortwave, when the shortwave frequencies, by the way, were really full of signals, there were always some stations that were very fixed on some frequencies, especially in Europe. In Europe, there's a lot of 49-meter band stations that were just for Europe, and they would broadcast very much on the same frequency. Some stations never changed, or changed very little. An example, BBC World Service. The BBC World Service here for North America in the 80s, 5975, that was a year-round frequency. It would never change. So some stations you could say, well, BBC was on that frequency all the time. The Radio Netherlands was on that frequency all the time. Swiss Radio International had that frequency all the time. HCJB in Quito, Ecuador, they had 9745 for as long as I remember, until the end. So because of some of these stations, they were able to print out country names on the dial. But it was not 100% because, yes, some stations did change. And yes, there are some country names that they were on the bands on the dial that at some point were useless because stations didn't broadcast there anymore. So what else? Mr. Roman, where can you monitor those solar waves you mentioned, brother? We're going to continue on, Mr. Roman, and we're going to talk about more and more of that solar activity. Philip Briggs, what is the upper frequency limit that the solar cycle has an effect? It's very hard because it's kind of a transition zone, but I can tell you one thing is that when solar flux is extremely high in a very strong cycle, it can actually propagate 80, 90, even 100 megahertz. But typically, above about 60 megahertz, it has less and less effect. But it can. It's pretty amazing. And it is pretty amazing what happens. And I don't hate solar flares, Gerald, and I'm going to tell you why. I don't hate solar flares for one reason. When there's solar flares, means there's solar activity. That means might have some really cool propagation, especially in the higher frequency ranges. And 49-meter band was packed. And I loved HEJB for sure. Yeah, exactly. Alex Canavos as an example, a great example. 9420, 9420, that has been Greece. And even when I was starting to listen to shortwave back in the 80s, I believe 9420 was Voice of Greece frequency. So if Greece was written there, it would still be okay today to receive. And pretty good. David Arden says, my QSL card was from HCJB. Wow, his first QSL. My first QSL was WYFR. I have multiple HCJB QSLs. They had nice series of QSLs, for sure. So I'm not sure, Gerald, the Queen listens to shortwave anymore. D-Raf says, I remember getting Iowa, New Orleans, Florida on his analog TV in the middle of the day in the 70s. Yep. So it's still busy, but what we're saying here, Richard, the 49-meter band was a gazillion times more busy than that in the 80s, I can tell you that. So, off with your heads. Hello there, SV1LHZ from Greece, Athens, Greece. Jim, nice to have you on board. Pretty cool. Pretty cool to have so many different countries around the world that are right now watching the show. It's really, really nice. And cool to see everybody. David Timoshchuk Says, I haven't checked in a live show in some months, but I'm near an internet connection today. Just wondering if you remember two broadcasters from the past, Monitor Radio International and Radio for Peace International. Yes, I do remember that. Monitor Radio or Shortwave Monitor, I remember that. In Radio for Peace International in Costa Rica. I got 2 QSLs from them. Radio for Peace International had a lot of trouble with Costa Rican government because of their point of views on all sorts of politics issues. And I can tell you one thing: when Radio for Peace International left the shortwave bands, and the reason they did is because there was a hurricane or a really bad storm, and it knocked down their antennas. And the government made it so hard for them to kind of fix that they just left. And they didn't have a lot of money. But I remember Radio for Peace International. That was a nice one too to listen to. Pretty cool. And Theo, did I ever hear any noise or signal that really wasn't listed and you did not know what it was? So many times, and still today. Still today you'll hear some stuff. If you tune around a lot like I do, especially in between the international broadcast bands, very surprising what you will actually hear. You have no idea what it is. There's still a lot of those unknown signals on the bands. Not as many as maybe in the past, but still a lot. So, yep, many times it happened. Yep, HCJB was Herald Christ Jesus Blessings. They actually had started broadcasting on shortwave on Christmas Day of 1929 or 26, something like that. A very, very long time, 1929 maybe, or 39. I'm trying to remember. They were there for a long time. And yeah, Greece, Spain, Brazil. A lot of people today. We have Pakistan, the UK, we have the United States, Canada, we have Brazil, we have Greece, we have so many different places that people are from. Spain, really nice. The Netherlands, all of that, pretty cool. Happy New Year, and it's great, happy to say hello. Philip Briggs says, remembers in the 90s some US police signals on 30-40 megahertz were received in the UK. Yes, absolutely, that was solar activity, Philip. I remember I had a portable scanner in 1990, 1991. We were just off and still in a high solar activity point. And I heard tons and tons of signals on that scanner on the 30 to 54 megahertz range every day, in the wintertime mostly, from the United States and everything. And yes, that has to do with high solar flux and high solar activity. So that's pretty sure. Hey, Jim Kaysen, nice to have you on board. And Bobby Burgess, what forces of nature can affect shortwave listening, or is it just in space? Shortwave listening is not affected by most of weather, stuff like that on Earth. There are frequency ranges that are affected by the weather. Shortwave is not really affected by the weather or by most phenomena from Earth, except the geomagnetic field. And we're going to come to that as we're talking about the solar cycle and the solar activity and the effect it has with the shortwave propagation. So the Earth's geomagnetic field does have a big effect on shortwave. But most of the impact and what changes shortwave is from space. The only thing that will affect weather-wise shortwave propagation, summertime when it's hot, we'll have thunderstorms. Now the lightning does a lot of crashes. So it means that in the summertime, in the warm summertime weather, we might have more noise on the shortwave bands because of the increased activity. And because shortwave in its nature is something that actually has signals propagating from far away, what happens with shortwave is that the lightning strike doesn't need to be next to your home to have an impact on the radio. You can have lightning strikes 1,000 miles away or 1,000 kilometers away, and you'll hear them on shortwave because they propagate like shortwave signals. So that's for sure one of the impacts of weather on Earth, basically. And what else do we have? Let's just check it out. Hey, Danny, Shortwave and Radio DX from in snowy Yonkers, New York. Hello there. And really, really cool. Polly's 557104. What do I think of the AOR DV1? I only read some stuff on the AOR DV1. From what I see, it seems to be a nice device. I have seen a few negative reports about people saying that it has difficulty accepting, or when signals were strong, it often had a lot of overload. So that's something that you might be careful. What's nice is it's basically the DV1 is kind of a software-defined radio in a box, and it has updates, so it of course will have. So not really a DRC antenna. Snow on the shortwaves, typically just shortwave spectrum. Snow does not affect the shortwave bands, like rain doesn't affect shortwave bands. There's no noticeable change in the strength of a signal on shortwave because it's snowing or raining, really, in general. So it doesn't usually have an impact. Most of the weather patterns don't really have an impact. So actually, it was yesterday. Gérald, la fête des rois was yesterday. Hey, VA2XMX Petro, nice to have you on board. Happy New Year. And all my resolutions going so far, rather crappy. After 7 days, I'm supposed to lose weight, and I think I gained 2 pounds. So maybe I should reverse my resolution, say I got to take more pounds. No, I really want to lose some weight, and I'll be pretty serious. No, it doesn't have really much of an effect. Usually the RC antennas in the very low, below 30 megahertz. Pretty much all of the signals are unaffected by weather, whether it's rain, snow, or anything, for the most part. So, it's just, yeah, Tio, I also do like that a lot. When there's a snowstorm, nothing like, having a snowstorm outside and it's minus 10 or minus 20. And you're listening to Brazil, for example. It's like, wow, this is cool. It's like, pretty nice. And New Year's resolution, 640 by 480. Well, at least, Scotty Tier 6, you could have chosen a 1080p resolution, at least. Putin and fin du monde, oh my God. Yeah, I'm not gonna lose weight with that, I can tell you that. And yeah, power outages are fun for radio guys. This is always a funny thing. When the power goes out here, everybody goes crazy. And I'm probably one of the only ones that's like, oh, cool. I'm going to listen to shortwave with no noise now. So, yes, the AOR DV1. And that's the nice part about the AOR DV1 is because it has firmware updates. It can add and unencrypt all sorts of digital communications. That's the very positive point of the DV1, for sure. So, pretty cool. Okay, as we continue talking about the shortwave propagation and the solar cycle, I'm not drinking very fast today, Talking too much. So, okay, now we've learned that there's an 11-year solar cycle. It's an average, means it can be longer or shorter. What's the state of solar cycle 24? We are right now in solar cycle 24. Solar cycle 24, we are in the descending phase, and in a year or two, we should pretty much be at the minimum of the solar cycle. The minimum of a solar cycle is always that part that I hate personally, because the low output of energy from the sun means that the ionosphere will not be as solid. It would not be as strong as it could be, and it has a big impact on propagation of shortwave signals. So we were talking about there's a high and a low in the shortwave cycles, and what does it have as an effect on propagation on that part? Well, on a high part of a solar cycle, the sun's output is so much stronger that it actually makes the ionosphere thicker and more dense, and so it will support higher frequencies that can propagate. A great example of what would impact a high in a solar and a low solar activity period, the 10-meter amateur band, 28 megahertz. I get tons of messages, people that view my video of the 10-meter band and tell me, well, that band's always dead. It's usually dead pretty much in a down part of the solar cycle. Why? Because the solar output is so low that the ionosphere cannot support 28 megahertz. It just goes right through and goes to space. And basically, in a low part of a solar cycle, above 25 megahertz is almost never, interesting. Now, it doesn't mean not to listen to, and that's always what I want to stress out, because there's other phenomena that affects those frequencies. A great example, sporadic E-skip. Sporadic E-skip is something that happens, and you never know when it's going to happen. When that happens, it's, like localized, really strong patches of ionization in the ionosphere, and these will give you 10-meter band. And so even in the low part of the cycle, don't never say, oh, I'm not gonna go to the 10-meter band. We're in the low part of the cycle. It must be empty and there's nothing there. That's the worst attitude to have as a shortwave listener and as an amateur radio operator, because the 10-meter band, you never know when it could be open. And in the low part of a solar cycle, it still can be open. So don't think that because we're in the low part, well, I'm not going to buy that 10-meter mobile rig because, well, we'll be in the low part, and that guy's saying that, it doesn't propagate on 10 meters. That's not exactly it. Okay, on shortwave, 1 plus 1 does not equal 2. On shortwave, 1 plus 1 is more complex than that. And basically, that's why 10 meters, it could be open at any time. You can listen to it. You might say, hey, solar flux is only 70. And so 10 meters will probably not be open. And behold, you go on 10 meters and it's full of signals. There's other phenomena like sporadic E-skip. So, don't think because we're in the low part that you will not go there. It's not exactly like that. But yes, in the low part of the solar cycle, 10-meter band will not be open very often. Not as often as when you're in the high part. When you're in the high part of the solar cycle, 10 meters is open every day, because what the solar flux and the output of the sun, it affects something called the MUF, maximum usable frequency. The maximum usable frequency is, in general, pretty much in correlation with solar activity. So the more solar activity, the higher the maximum usable frequency will be. So in a high solar activity, MUF could be at 35, 40 megahertz easily. In a low part of the cycle, MUF could be in the daytime as low as 20, 22 megahertz. In the nighttime, like right now, I've noticed the MUF For east-west signals here in Canada, here in Montreal at least, barely makes it above 7 or 8 megahertz in the evening right now. North-south signals a little different. I do hear Brazil on 11780 part of the evening, but even that fades away a lot. So there's an effect, and it affects, of course, what we'll be listening to. Now, in a high and a low part of a solar cycle, there's also other things that will impact your shortwave listening. So in a high part, there's more sunspots. In the low part, there's less sunspots. What are sunspots, first of all? Think of sunspots as areas on the sun where the magnetic field from the sun actually goes above the surface of the sun. And what it does is it creates kind of a bubble that is not dark. When we say there's, dark spots on the sun or sunspots, they're not dark. They look very dark because they're not as, they don't have as much light coming out of them as the rest of the solar surface. So that's why they look dark. They look black. But if you look very closely to a sunspot, you'll see that it's actually still lighted up. It's just that it's less intense. And that's because of the magnetic bubble that's moving across that area. So it creates kind of a dent on the solar surface, which are the sunspots. And a solar cycle means that the sun, the magnetic output, the magnetic field of the sun gets more or less tense and entangled together. The sun's geomagnetic field is like an elastic, and when the sun turns, because it doesn't turn at the same speed everywhere, so typically the sun's equator doesn't rotate at the same speed at the sun's poles. What it does is it stretches the magnetic field everywhere on the sun at some point. And a lot of the researchers think that that's pretty much what's driving the solar activity. So as they get stretched out, they get entangled more or less at some point, and it follows that 11-year cycle. What happens is that these magnetic forces on the sun are extremely strong. And what they could create when you're in the high part of the solar activity is solar flares. What's a solar flare? It's typically a part of the magnetic field that just collapsed and created a huge explosion. That, even the smallest solar flare on the sun is 1,000,000 times stronger than the biggest atomic explosion that man ever made. So it gives you an idea of how much energy there's in there. And of course, when that magnetic field collapses there and creates that, that solar flare, a solar flare is like an explosion that throws out in space an enormous amount of plasma, which is superheated gas, if you want. And of course, that has a polarity. It's a gas that actually has a lot of energy in it. And it's it's like very electrical, if you want. And what that will happen is that in the high part of the solar cycle, there are more solar flares. Why? Because the sun is more active. There's just so much more happening on the sun's surface. On the lower part of the solar activity, in the lower part, it doesn't mean you won't have any flares, but it means you will have less flares than in the high part of solar activity. So for example, the last flare we had was like a month and a half ago. I remember seeing something about it. We haven't had before that flares for quite a little while. And, we're going to the minimum right now. It just means that we will see less flares. Doesn't mean we won't see any. Because even in the minimum, the sun still outputs a lot of energy. So The solar flares will be rarefied. There's going to be less of them, but there's still going to be some. And the funniest thing is I was reading a very nice article about the strongest solar flares ever measured. One of them is from the Carrington event of 1850, which is a humongous solar flare that if it would have happened today, we would be in trouble because it would have really, do a lot of damage on the power lines. And the solar flare, it seems that the solar flares, the strongest solar flares ever measured, often coincide with the minimum of the solar activity. So that's kind of scary because it's like, okay, some of the strongest flare ever, for some unknown reason, seem to have happened in the minimum of the sun instead of the maximum, where there's a lot of flares. So that's kind of an interesting thing here. And, is it just because we haven't measured a lot of solar activity right now? We haven't measured, we're at the 24th solar cycle that we're measuring. We probably haven't measured the solar cycle really well until maybe 40 or 50 years ago. When we started having satellites in orbit, that's pretty much when we started to really notice the solar activity and the impact it has. Because it has an impact on satellites, not just the solar flares, but when the solar activity gets high, it superheats the outside shell of the Earth's atmosphere, and Earth's atmosphere actually expands in the high point of a solar cycle, and the Earth's atmosphere collapses in the low part of a solar cycle. And the impact of that is that since a lot of satellites are in low Earth orbit, when the Earth atmosphere expands, it creates more drag on satellites. So you will see more satellites drop out of the sky in high solar activity, more debris, because there's more drag. And a low point in the solar activity, atmosphere collapses, and that creates an atmosphere, sorry guys, creates an atmosphere that doesn't touch as much the satellites. The drag isn't there. And in general, as we send out satellites, because even if we don't hear about it, there are dozens and dozens of satellites that are sent out every year. But when the satellites are put in their orbit, it creates debris that floats around Earth and just orbits Earth. Part of the debris falls back down because of high solar activity. And it has been noted that when solar activity is low, the debris around Earth actually start accumulating more because there's less drag to make them fall back down. So what impact does a solar flare have on shortwave propagation? First of all, at the moment of a solar flare, there's often a lot of protons that are sent out into space. And the protons, they arrive here at the speed of light. And typically, the speed of light means that, for example, if you look at the sun, the light you are receiving in your eyes has been sent out 8 minutes earlier. So there's an 8-minute time before the light reaches, gets from the sun to Earth. Solar flare, major solar flare, and there are categories of solar flares. Little, small solar flares, medium-sized, and huge, which are C-level solar flares, M-level solar flares, and X-level solar flares. The strongest are X-level solar flares, and these are amazingly strong. When there's a solar flare, the protons, the first to reach Earth 8 minutes later, will collapse the ionosphere on the side of Earth where it's sunny. So if there's a huge solar flare, just to give you guys an idea, and you're in darkness, and the station you're listening to on shortwave is also in darkness in the path. So say you're in the evening here in North America, it's dark, and you're listening to a signal from Radio Romania, and the low, 49-meter band, path is darkness from Romania to Canada. A huge solar flare happening on the sunny side of Earth will have no impact. You won't see any difference. But the lighted side of Earth, or if your signal you're listening to makes it from the lighted side, the day side of Earth, into the dark side of Earth, you will see a phenomenon that's called, it's simply a disappearing of all the signals. Basically, all the signals on the bands suddenly disappear. And that happens very quickly. It's like you're listening to something, it's really strong, and I've actually witnessed this many times in my shortwave listening times. And with my experience as a shortwave listener and also knowing the solar activity, when that happens, I know, oh, the sun must have just had a solar flare. And so what happens, it collapses the ionosphere and increases the absorption. So that means that in a solar flare, the immediate effect, 8 minutes later, shortwave signals just disappear. And this lasts, depending on the size of the solar flare, anywhere from a few minutes to, up to an hour or two, depending on how strong the flare was. And the signals will eventually come back. That effect will stop at the moment where the ionosphere was able to reconstruct itself correctly. So the protons will collapse the ionosphere, but once the protons stop arriving, because it's like a first burst of protons if you want, solar activity will continue rebuilding the ionosphere. So depending on how strong the flare is, the shortwave fade out will eventually start coming back, and you'll hear, for example, the station will be gone. You're listening to something on the 19-meter band, for example, and it just disappears in a very fast amount of time, like a minute or two, and wow, it's not there anymore. And then if you keep listening there to a signal that is broadcasted long enough, you will see that it will eventually start with a very weak signal and slowly come back to its full strength an hour, 2 hours after this happened. So that means that in a high solar activity period, one of the things that happens is that, yeah, you might have solar flares in shortwave blackouts. And this will happen. Pretty much it happens every time there's a solar flare. It depends on how intense it is. So it's not always very strong. But depending on the strength of the solar flare, it might be very, very strong. So an X flare, for example, which is some of the strongest flares, it could take more than an hour before shortwave starts to come back. But this affects only the daylight side of Earth. Only the daylight side of Earth. Very little impact on the night side of Earth. And that's the first effect of a solar flare. And now before I continue on, I'll open another beer. And we'll look at the chat room a little bit. Hey, Sunbird 90, nice to have you on board. Pretty cool. Okay. What else do we have here? So let's continue on here. David Barcelona says, let's see. Okay, solar acne. VA2XMS, yeah. Sunspots are solar acne. Do we get solar flares from Betelgeuse? It's too far away. These stars are so far away that, yes, we do. By the way, we do notice that stars that we see in the sky, when they observe, vary in brightness. Some vary in brightness to a point where we think there are like humongous solar flares and humongous sunspots or star spots, if you want. This is not unique to our sun. It seems that different stars have different solar cycles. And one thing that we know about our sun is that we're really lucky. And, well, we're not lucky in the point where probably that's the reason why Earth exists still. The sun is 4.5 billion years old. Or if you believe Brother Stare, we're just 6,000 years old. But in reality, the sun is right now 4.5 billion years old. And a lot of stars have such high solar activity that they would wipe out life and sterilize a planet several times. So what we know is that here on Earth, this never happened with our sun. Which means we know that our sun, for the first 4.5 billion years, never had a solar flare strong enough to actually kill life on Earth. And that's good news, because it means, yeah, we might be scared of very, very strong solar flares because of our technology, but it's not going to kill us, technically. It might kill us in a different way because human is stupid, but you know what? It does show that some stars are very, very violent in their solar cycle. It's just amazing. And also, there's another thing that's amazing also, is that we live in our solar system in a bubble. It doesn't show, but you know what? The sun's influence around our solar system is extremely big. It goes farther away than Pluto. And we live basically in a bubble of solar wind. And that bubble of solar wind actually protects us from high energy particles that come from the universe. And an example of that is that when the solar cycle starts to go down, on Earth we have an increase in the number of high energy cosmic rays that reach the surface. Why? Because when we have strong solar activity, the solar wind is so strong that it pushes away energy particles from the universe. We still get some, but we get less. Now we're going down, and actually I was reading an article today on spaceweather.com that was talking about the fact that as we're going down our solar cycle right now, there's an increase in cosmic rays that are reaching the ground. And believe it or not, but there's I was seeing a study that said that something like 1% of all the cancers that people have around the world, 1%, is created by high energy particles and cosmic rays that reach Earth. 1%. So surprising. Very surprising. And what else do we have here? Well, you know, Rich Hill, hello there. Why is there an 11-year cycle? It's simply the way that the sun works. The sun's rotation, speed of rotation, and different rotation simply makes it, you know, we don't, one thing we got to know is we don't understand our sun very well. We are in 2017, and even with all the research, we still don't understand our sun very well. And we know there's a cycle. We know that it's related to its rotation and everything. We don't know why it's 11 years, though. We have, you know, we don't understand enough right now to know why it's 11 years, or on average 11 years, basically. No way, Carol. Light beer is no good. I don't like light beer. So, okay. Let's just check if anybody else came to the. Yeah, I know. Sakia Walker. Good evening, KD4. KBL 73 and Shortwave. Yeah, it's cool. And yes, Betelgeuse is a very, very big star. And actually in the northern hemisphere, we can see it right now. If you guys look at the sky in the evening, we have Orion, which is a very beautiful constellation, and Orion actually is very, very nice to look at. And it's high in our winter skies right now, so it's pretty cool for that. And that's that constellation actually has that famous Betelgeuse star, which is a humongous. It's one of the really, really big stars in our universe, in our own galaxy, and it's pretty amazing. So, yep, and that's one thing that we're going to talk about a little also. The solar flux, the solar cycle also has one thing, and it still goes with the fact that the magnetic field twists and turns. What kind of defines what time our solar cycle is going to start, the new one, is the magnetic reversal of the polarity of the sunspots. Sunspots on the sun are have a polarity. They're like a big magnet, and basically, when we, like for now, we're going down the solar cycle. At some point in the next few years, we're going to start seeing sunspots that have a magnetic polarity that will be reversed. When that happens, we know that we're starting a new cycle. Every cycle, the polarity of the sunspots are reversed compared to the previous cycles. So what happens is there's a part of it, we have our polarity, we go to the minimum. At some point, there's a mix. The sun will have both polarity of sunspots from this cycle and also polarity reversed from other spots from the new cycle. And it mixes together at some point, up to a point where you don't see any more polarity from the previous cycle. It's only reversed polarity in the new cycle. And all of that goes into the solar activity. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And yes, I did see that, Rich Hill, that I was listening to that that expert, Tamita Skov. I don't know how to pronounce it. I remember hearing her name, but I don't remember. She's a really solar geek. We're going to call her a solar geek. But one thing we got to know, because even though I did say that, the sun, the output from Betelgeuse and so on is too far away to have an impact on the regular scale. Where a star like that might have an impact, and we did see on Earth a few impacts like those. Since the 4.5 billion years that Earth exists, we have proof that Earth was sterilized a few times by some cosmic rays of some sort. And what we know and what we think is that the few times that it happened, it's stars, humongous stars like Betelgeuse that are not too far away. And when they explode in a supernova, typically the amount of energy that is sent out from a supernova is 1 billion times what the whole galaxy will emit in 1 second. And it has so much energy that we know that Earth, the life on Earth, was stopped at least twice by cosmic rays that were so intense that it just killed all life. And life had to restart again at some point. So it shows us that, yes, stars from a certain distance from Earth, if they would explode, could impact. And every gamma ray burst and everything that we, that come from there, it's if the star's close enough, it will have a major impact from Earth. And I believe there's a survey that they did looking at the stars in our vicinity, and which ones could be really, really dangerous if they would go supernova. And I'm not sure. I don't remember if Betelgeuse is one of those, but there's a few stars that if one day they do, we might be in trouble. So yeah, but Jupiter doesn't block. It would not block would not block gamma ray bursts or things like that. We will have the full the full effect. Jupiter is a major player in our solar system. Jupiter and Saturn are major players in protecting us of all sorts of things in the solar system. One of the articles that I've read was why is it that we don't have as many asteroids that hit Earth? That was a question for a while, and basically, one of the answers is Jupiter. Jupiter has such a high gravity that it transformed the orbits of a lot of the asteroids that are in our solar system, and actually lowered the number of asteroids that hits Earth, which is a good thing, because we don't really want to have one of those. But it's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing when you think about it. What else do we have here? What else do we have? Okay, hello there, Kevin from email. Hello, Susan, California. Says hello and very interesting. She says that she's heard a little bit about solar activity, but that she finds it fascinating and interesting, and she's going to watch the rest of the show for sure. Well, thank you for being here. Frank in Tampa Bay, Florida says hello. Says very interesting show. Was not able to reach to actually watch the show yesterday for tuning the bands, but loves every minute of the live shows, and he thanks me for what he done, for what I'm doing, sorry. And well, thank you, Frank. I didn't notice. Frank says there's a little something for you in PayPal to help you continue. Thank you, Frank. Much appreciated. I had a few people give me some PayPal donations this week from the radio channel, so really, really nice. And really, really nice. Mr. Roman, electromagnetic pulse produced by solar activity is never strong enough to blow your radio out. It never would be. Even the strongest solar flares will not blow out your radio. The only electromagnetic pulses that are strong enough to do so would be from an atomic explosion, from an atomic bomb, for example. If somebody would drop an atomic bomb near a city or near where you live, the electromagnetic pulse would probably burn the receiver's RF transistors immediately. The funny part is that most of the radios, here it is for those that are asking for the PayPal. Here's the email for the PayPal in the chat. So the only receivers that can actually withstand electromagnetic pulses from nuclear explosions are these old tube radios. Pretty much all tube radios would still work because they're much more heavy duty than transistorized radios. And that's kind of fun when you think about it. Funny. So I can see in a post apocalyptic world of nuclear explosions and everybody with their tube radios, and that's kind of interesting. And hey, Crazy Tom, nice to have you on board. Thanks for sharing, by the way, the electromagnetic storm, or the geomagnetic storm of March 13th, 1989, that I still remember very well in my head, when the power grid here in Quebec collapsed due to a very strong solar flare. So, hey, cheers, everybody. I just opened a second beer, and we're going to continue talking about solar activity. So, okay. We said that when there's a solar flare, and that typically there are more solar flares in the maximum part of the solar activity than the minimum, solar flares, the first impact, protons that reach Earth, kind of damage the ionosphere. Doesn't have much effect apart from that, except maybe on some satellites in orbit. If there's a very, very strong proton storm, it can damage satellite electronics. So typically, in a very, very strong solar flare, some satellites in orbit can actually be damaged to a point that they stop working. And we've seen a few in the past 10, 20 years when there were some really strong solar flares. Some satellites stopped responding. Some satellites will, go berserk, but are still okay. It's just that they need to reset it and, start it again. But there are some satellites that just go out of control and are never brought back. The proton storm will damage the satellites in orbit. And an example of that also, if there's a big solar flare, the International Space Station. An International Space Station, they have a special room set up. And basically, it's something, they have to go to that place. And when they send out, a new crew to the International Space Station or something, they often look at, solar activity. One of the things that we didn't know back then, and that could have been really horrible, when the United States went to the moon with the Apollo 11 spaceship. There was one Apollo mission, I don't remember which one it was, where there was an amazing solar flare that happened like 2 days after they came back to Earth. And if the solar flare would have happened a few days before, it would have killed the astronauts that were on the moon. They would have all been dead from radiation levels that were too high. And it's something we didn't know. It's something that they didn't know back then, that we know today. And they were lucky, because the major solar flare that happened only a few days after they got back to Earth, so they were safe on our planet. So it gives an idea. Imagine a trip to Mars. How risky could that be? Even if you do it in minimum minimum activity, there are still some solar flares. And the ISS, they have a room that shields partly, but you know what? If there would be a major solar flare, a really big one, typically, even when they're in that special room that they have, they still get enormous amounts of high energy particles. So that's pretty intense. And to give you guys an idea also of the impact of cosmic rays and all of that, when you guys take a plane and go from the eastern part of the United States or Canada to Europe over the Atlantic Ocean, and the plane travels at 30, 30,000 feet, 40,000 feet. Just crossing from the United States to Europe, you get the equivalent of about one chest X-ray in radiation every time you do that travel. So it gives you an idea. And for those that want to know what tubes are, because I was talking about tube radios, here, let me just check it out. Let's show everybody what tubes are. I have a couple of examples probably very close to me here. And the tubes are, let me check this. So I got a few boxes of here. And so, if you're new and you never had a tube radio in or a tube operated device, these are pretty much what were the transistors of the 1940s and 50s. They came into these little boxes like these. This one is a Westinghouse tube. And you actually, if the radio stopped working or the TV stopped working, well, people had these little tubes like this. So these are the little tubes. They have these little legs here that go into the socket. And so these are, depending on the tubes, a lot of tubes do different things, but think of, in general, tubes are the equivalent of what we have as transistors today. And they glow in the night. They're nice. They're nice when they're, I like a tube radio or a tube device that you turn on when it's dark. It's kind of cool. You see these tubes. So, they come in different shapes and sizes. Some are really big. Some are smaller. These are small. And, well, that's pretty much what tubes are. So, that's pretty nice. Crazy Tom says, you always do a great job. I think you should have your own shortwave radio program. Greetings from Massachusetts. Thanks, Crazy Tom. Nice to have you on board as usual. And thank you for the nice comments. So, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So there's a lot of, the tubes in old radios and old TVs. Today they're replaced with transistors, but there are still some tubes, by the way. For example, my Marshall guitar amp has a tube in it. These are still popular in some amps, and there's still some. There is still some companies that build tubes that are specialized for specific. Dolly Parton tubes. Not to mess up the words here, huh? It's very important. Okay. So cheers. We'll take another sip here. We'll drink a little faster. So before we continue talking about solar activity and everything, we've been on now for 2 hours already, and so I'm blabbing away, and it's just incredible how fast time flies. And so you're watching the Shortwave show. Hey, Gub Scout, 6L6 tubes. Yep. Mine is, I'm trying to remember, is my Marshall amp. What's the tube in my Marshall amp? I don't remember. I don't remember which one it uses. Is it a 6L6 in the Marshall amp? So, yeah, mine is mixed, Canadian Merchant. My Marshall amp is valve state series. It's the valve state series. It has two parts. One part is the transistor amplification and distortion side. And one part is the tube amplification and distortion side. And I gotta say, it has a different sound. And so it's just kind of cool, and it's fun because there's a little hole at one point on the amp, and when I actually drive it to distortion with the guitar, you can actually see the tube filament that starts to glow a little more. Kind of cool. So pretty interesting. That's a great idea, Gerald. I didn't think about that. Yes, I will. I will actually take a note of this. in my phone to get a beacon part of my list. Yep. So beacon part. Yep. That's a great idea, Gerald. Thanks for the suggestions. And if anyone has suggestions for my frequency list, let me know. Let me know. Well, you know what, Gub Scout? I remember my sister's, my brother-in-law, that was an amateur radio operator, had a Yesu transceiver, bought brand new in the 1980s. And I was amazed at the fact that it had tubes in it, because pretty much everything in the 80s were transistorized. And I remember when he bought it and I saw the tubes, I was like, is this brand new? And he said, yeah, it's a brand new transceiver from Yesu. And I was really, really amazed at such a modern radio or transceiver that still had tubes. But then again, you know what? It's when you think about it, it's not that surprising, because what is the most demanding for transistors and transceivers is the transmitter side. Getting a lot of watts from transistors is the biggest problem. And so it's much easier to get 100 watts without having too much problems out of tubes than from getting them from transistor amplification. Transistors have one major issue. When heat's too high, actually transistors break down. And so that's probably why they probably thought, well, you know what? If we got to get 100, 200 watts out, why not use tubes? It's going to be better than using transistors that might break down or something. Kind of interesting. So, like I was saying, you are watching the Shortwave show from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. We are here every 2 weeks on Saturday evenings, 2000 hours Universal Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, North America. And it's always fun to do these little shows. And cheers, everybody, as we talk about solar activity, the impact it has on propagation. Okay, so now we have solar flares. We know protons arrive first, 8 minutes later. They create shortwave blackouts. And basically, the effect of the solar flare is not over. That solar flare will have created something called a CME, or coronal mass ejection. A cloud of plasma that's traveling to space, that's charged electrically, and that takes a lot more time to arrive here. Typically, depending on the strength of the solar flare, taking into effect the not just the strength of solar flare, but also how it's composed and everything, and the speed of the solar wind, it will arrive here in as little as 12 to 24 hours, and the fastest of all the plasma clouds. Typically, often a few days, 2-3 days before they arrive. And that one will do another type of effect. When it arrives, it will not affect the ionosphere directly itself, but it will affect something that Earth has, which is the geomagnetic field. Earth is a giant magnet going through space. It has a pretty strong magnetic field for a planet. If you look at all the planets around our solar system, except for Jupiter, that has an amazing magnetic field, Earth's magnetic field is rather strong for the planet that we live on. And it's also a good thing for us, because charged energetic particles get trapped in the magnetic field. And instead of penetrating up to the surface and hitting us, it gets sent to the poles like a magnet. And basically, that cloud will impact the magnetic field of Earth because it's charged electrically. And that will make the geomagnetic field of Earth move and kind of ring like a bell. And sometimes they would say that if we could hear with our ears how it reacts, it's a little bit like when you hit a bell. And the sound it creates is the vibration. While the Earth's magnetic field starts to vibrate and move around a lot, it gets compressed. When there's a very strong flare and a very big cloud of plasma, the Earth's magnetic field gets really compressed very strongly. And it changes shape. And what happens is this creates another effect. The geomagnetic field becomes active, and then it becomes stormy. The electrical currents and the way that it reacts damages and changes the ionosphere, makes absorption of signals a lot, and changes the characteristics of our propagation. A very strong solar flare often creates a very strong geomagnetic storm. And this makes the ionosphere absorb more the signals in general, especially the closer you are to the poles of the Earth, the more you'll see the effect of a geomagnetic storm on shortwave signals. But it doesn't necessarily, break down shortwave. It changes its patterns of propagation. It does all sorts of weird effects. So for example, in a geomagnetic storm, you might hear increased signals from north-south paths. But no more signals from east-west, for example. In a geomagnetic storm, you will see all sorts of effects. People that listen to VHF, UHF, and really high frequencies, there's all sorts of auroral effects with these frequency ranges. And basically, the geomagnetic storm will last for as long as the plasma cloud is going through, but also once the plasma cloud is gone, the Earth's geomagnetic field is still ringing like a bell, and it needs to slowly release that energy and come back to normal. And of course, that affects our propagation a lot. And it's not just solar flares that do this. Right now, we have an effect of that. Let's check out the indices right now. And I will re-talk about these indices because a lot of people tend to not really understand that well what these indices are. So right now, K-index is at 3 and solar flux is 72. And K-index is an indication of that geomagnetic field and the geomagnetic storming. 3 is quiet to unsettled. It's not the best indice you can have, but it's not too bad. And solar flux 72, that's pretty low. So basically, the geomagnetic field rings like a bell. It actually changes propagation. A lot of signals get absorbed on different frequencies, so there's a lot of stations that you just don't hear when that happens. Right now, we have an effect like that. And it's not even a solar flare. The sun also has what's called coronal holes. The sun's atmosphere is a very complex system. And sometimes the way that the atmosphere is setting itself, there are what we call coronal holes, which are not holes, but kind of areas where the sun's atmosphere is weaker. And it lets the solar wind go out faster. So basically, every day, 365 days a week, our Earth is being pretty much, the solar wind blows through Earth all the time. Solar wind is something that's there all the time. But because of certain, solar flares, or in this case, coronal holes, the speed of the solar wind can actually increase. So the speed of the solar wind is increasing right now because the coronal hole lets more solar wind go through. And so the speed is higher. 300, 400, 500 kilometers per second. That also impacts our geomagnetic field. The faster the solar wind, the more compressed it gets, and the more interaction it actually will have with the geomagnetic field, and it has an effect. Right now we are in a fast solar wind stream. There is a coronal hole that's on the sun. It's pretty big, so the effect will last for a few days. It started to affect Thursday. It should last until Sunday, maybe Monday, before things get back to normal. But unlike a solar flare, which really sends a big cloud of plasma, a fast solar wind stream will not have as much impact, but it will have highs and lows. So this geomagnetic field would go to storm conditions, go back to unsettled, go back to storm. It's, an up and down while the solar wind is blowing. So conditions in a state like we are now of a coronal hole actually change quite often. So 1 hour you might be listening to your favorite station and it works well, and 2 hours later it might be bad propagation because geomagnetic storming. Now geomagnetic storming also creates a phenomena that a lot of people know about, which is the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights. A lot of people falsely think that Northern Lights are created. I remember hearing that so many times here. Oh, Northern Lights are created by the sun reflecting off the ice on in the Arctic, which is totally false. I've heard so many people say that. I'm amazed that a lot of people think that. Or the Northern Lights are one of the effects of when the sun is interacting with our geomagnetic field. In solar flares, or like now, in a high solar wind stream from a coronal hole. Basically, Aurora Borealis happens when the particles from the sun start hitting our atmosphere. In general, the particles from the sun will hit the geomagnetic field of Earth, and it's going to be driven to the poles. But there will be an effect if it's stronger. It compresses a little more the geomagnetic field, gets into stormy conditions, and the area where the solar wind touches the atmosphere gets bigger. So basically you start having these greenish lights, all sorts of colors are there: green, yellow, red. Each color is a different molecule in our atmosphere that is excited by the electricity and just, sparks light. And basically, that's also an effect. So if you see that, for example, the K index is at 9, which is the highest it can be, and that is a major geomagnetic storm. A K index of 9 on shortwave will show as shortwave is pretty much dead. And also it means, for me here in Montreal, I'm going to go outside and see if I can see the Northern Lights. Now, I haven't seen the Northern Lights here in Montreal in a long time. And it's an amazing phenomena when you think about it. But really, 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 really cool. When you think about it, what all the effects and all the beautiful things that happens with that. So basically, that's what's going to happen, and you'll have geomagnetic storming, you'll have bad shortwave propagation very often, or interesting and unique propagation of shortwave signals, and that's pretty cool. And it does affect a lot of our hobby. It's very important to understand. So it also affects a lot of things. For example, in March 13th, 1989 here, we had a power outage that was because of a solar flare. and the cloud of plasma made a geomagnetic storm so big that it actually induced currents in the electrical grid here, and we had a major power outage. So it doesn't affect just shortwave, it affects power, it affects a lot of stuff. Actually, that's why they're scared of if there would be another Carrington event, a major solar flare from like in the 1850 that happened. In 1850, technology was still at a very minimum. There were transatlantic lines of telegraph. And basically, some stations even caught fire because the induced currents in these cables were so high that it's the key for the Morse code just sparked like a firework. So if that would happen today, it would be a major issue on the power grids and our sensitive electronics today. Okay, so we are talking about solar flares, solar activity, propagation from shortwave. F.O. Welsh, hello there. No problem. And Happy New Year. It's nice to see you here, even if it's late. Hey, PD0PMS, take care. It was nice to have you on board. Participating in the shortwave contest 80 and 40 meters organized by Veron. Yeah, I saw something like that. I need to check it out. There's also this weekend a radio teletype RTTY contest on the M bands. John Young, hello there. Nice to have you on board. Better late than never, from what they say. Dante, do you ever any jammers? HF, VHF, UHF? I've heard there's a lot of people doing bad stuff on VHF and UHF ham bands and stuff like that. On HF, there's some jammers from Cuba. Cuba's jamming a lot. There's also a few Asian countries that jam. So what else do we have here? What else do we have here? Okay, checking out everybody here and different places to make sure that everybody. Ray Lyle, hello there, welcome. Anything new with Radio Australia? What's new is that I've read an article that the general manager of Radio Australia says that they are not changing their mind. They are going off shortwave, and that it's a decision that cannot be reversed. And it's sad because it's you know what? It reminds me of a decision like Radio Canada International, where it's not just a decision. It almost feels like they're happy that it happens and they get off of shortwave and they just don't want to care anymore. It really looks similar. Here in Canada, Radio Canada International got off because, you know what? The CBC was so happy to have that $16.5 million a year budget and bring it back to Radio Canada, or the local CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And from what I see there is a decision that looks extremely the same thing. Let's get out of shortwave broadcasting because it costs a lot of money. You know, they have many more. Here in Canada, we had only one transmitter site, which was the Sackville, New Brunswick. Radio Australia has many more transmitter sites. So the budget of Radio Australia is probably much bigger than what Radio Canada International here had. And still, they're happy to probably get that money back. I can tell you that. And I got to say that it's sad. It's sad to see the Radio Australia is leaving. I will miss Radio Australia. And if you look at Greece is still on shortwave, and that country is pretty much in ruins, and they're still putting money in there. And it's funny. I don't know. It will be sad, that's for sure. PLF says, does solar flare activity can affect the classic FM broadcast radio also? Yes, it can have an effect because solar activity, when there's like huge solar flares, the way that it impacts the geomagnetic field and the ionosphere and the radio signals in general, yes, it can have an impact on the FM band in creating all sorts of weird propagation effects. It can increase um, interference to the different frequency ranges. So yes, there could be an effect, but it's a very small effect because of the usual FM station that you listen to is not far from where you are. So basically the effect for something that's close to you is negligible. It's to a point where you don't see it much. But yes, you can see it if, for example, it creates a special propagation effect and that you're listening or you suddenly start to listen or hear an FM station that maybe is 1,000 kilometers away. That could be a possibility because of solar activity impact on such a signal. But in the close range, an FM station or even a medium wave station that you're listening to the ground wave, very little impact in general. One thing on the medium wave bands you'll see, a geomagnetic storm, a strong geomagnetic storm, will increase absorption so much that in the evening, instead of hearing the medium wave stations from far away, you'll see that you only hear the local stations. Or it has a weird effect where certain distant stations that you hear regularly, say here in Montreal, I hear New York all the time. Well, New York's not there because of the effect of the geomagnetic storming, but hey, I hear stations farther away that are coming in. It's very, very weird. An effect of geomagnetic storming and solar flares would have is on GPS, for example. Anybody that uses a GPS, our phones have GPS now. I can tell you one thing, on a very strong solar flare and some very strong geomagnetic storming, your GPS can be off, and it can be off by a lot. It can be off so much that actually that's one of the things that they are checking out the most and kind of scared at what could happen. Anything that is satellite driven can be a problem in such a condition. So it's pretty surprising what can happen. Hey Bob T, hello there. What's my opinion of HD radios? If you're talking about HD radios in the like the medium wave broadcasters here in North America that have HD signals, you know what? HD radios like DRM on shortwave, Digital Radio Mondiale, is done in the wrong way. The people that do that do not understand what you should do. I'm not against HD radio. I'm not against DRM. What I am against is the way they're bringing that technology in. DRM, Digital Radio Mondiale, and shortwave should have had their own frequency ranges. Not be smack in the middle of the international broadcast bands and wipe out 20 kilohertz of signals. That for me is interference, not a good signal. So they should have had their own frequency ranges, because anyways you need a new radio to receive them, so why not use specific frequency ranges? And the second thing of HD radios on medium wave, for example, is that also it's creating interference, and that too. They should have had some specific band open up just for that. It's really done in the wrong way. And that said, I like to see the sales of HD radios. You know what? People have difficulty spending more than $20 for an AM/FM radio. I was at the Canadian Tires here, which is a big Canadian retail chain. And I was seeing a couple, this old couple. They were looking at radios, and I did hear one of the two say, "Oh, we're going to take that $25 radio. I don't see why I should pay $45 for an AM/FM radio." And that's the general thinking of radios today. I don't want to pay for an AM/FM radio. And I can bet you that a lot of people that had one, when it broke down or they didn't use it anymore, they just didn't care and didn't buy another one. I don't see a lot of people going to the stores and saying, hey, we're going to buy that new HD radio. Yeah, they're buying HD TV because that's the thing they're doing all the time. They're not going to buy an HD radio. The sales of HD radio must be very, very small. And so all of that together, I think is a bad thing. Look it's in Norway. Norway is phasing out FM in favor of HD FM. Well, I'm sorry, but you know what? You're going to kill your FM band and all these stations are going to disappear. It seems that most people are unhappy with that decision in Norway. Why? Because people don't want to buy a new radio. They don't care. You know what's going to do? They're going to go to HD radio, and people are just going to say, well, I'm going to listen to it through an app on my phone if I ever really want to listen to it. And better yet, they just won't listen to radio anymore. That's pretty much, what's going to happen. That's pretty much what's going to happen. Bobby Burgess, are we seeing the phase out of shortwave stations as we know it? Slowly. Shortwave glory was in the 70s and 80s, part of the 80s. As we have the internet today, a lot of stations are under the impression that the internet is where we were going to listen to, which is wrong. In most countries around the world, we are, strapped for cash. Countries are running deficits, have less and less money to do things. So what is the first thing that you want to cut? Things that you think is useless, like shortwave radio. And, these people don't understand the impact that shortwave radio will have. Radio Australia, great example. The general manager said that was an old media that's useless today. And everywhere, they don't understand one thing. Radio Australia does not understand that all the Pacific Islands where they were reaching people that didn't have a lot of money because they have this radio, but they don't have the internet necessarily, will not be there anymore. It takes a lot more money to listen to stations on the internet. You need a device and you need an internet connection that you pay. Shortwave, you need a radio and you listen in. In emergencies, shortwave is much better than the internet, I can tell you that. Slowly, stations are phasing out. Yep. The bands today are so quiet compared to the 80s. In the 80s, the major issue with the bands was if you had a crappy radio that didn't have a lot of selectivity, you'd have difficulty listening in on your favorite station because they were too jam-packed together. That's something that today is kind of not much of a problem. There's just so much space where there's nothing. So, yeah, there's a slow phase out. Some stations still think that it's, look at AIT. Voice of America has started broadcasting in Haitian language because when they were hit by the hurricane this summer, they know that that's the only way that somebody can be listening in Haiti. When there's the Nepal earthquake, BBC, VOA, all started broadcasting a little more. Every time there's something happening, these stations broadcast more. They understand that when there's something going wrong or going bad, that's one way you can listen in. And the internet is not the way to do it. So we're seeing a change in our hobby because of that. I do not think that shortwave will be completely dead in 20 years. In 20 years, we're going to have stations. It's just that North American shortwave bands are going to be quiet. In Asia, they're still going to be, or in Africa, they're still going to be shortwave because there's still a lot of people that listen in, with little radios. So, gotta say, it's something. James Megawatt, hello there. Do you use tuners for reception antennas, or is it not necessary and receive, and why? It's not totally useless, but a antenna tuner for reception will not give you much more signals. Of course, yes, a tuned antenna is better at both receiving and transmitting. I would guess if you have a good antenna and a good antenna tuner, you might see a slight difference in the reception conditions when you're tuning your antenna, so that it resonates on the frequency you're listening to. But in the overall shortwave reception, the impact is not that much, and it's not necessary to really tune it as much as transmissions you need to tune. If you don't tune your antenna when you're transmitting, you're going to have a very high standing wave. And that means that the mismatch of your transmitter and your antenna generates too much heat in your transmitter, and you can blow out the outputs of your transmitter. It's extremely important that when you're transmitting, your antenna is tuned. It's not as important for reception. I'm not saying it's zero. A few of you that are using tuners have told me that you've seen a difference of up to 2 or 3 S units sometimes if you tune in your antenna. And it's possible, yeah. Of course, you're tuning in your antenna. If it's tuned, it receives more of that signal because it resonates to the same frequency. But still, it's not something that, is that important, basically. Scotty Tier 6 says, if commercial shortwave goes away, it will become the domain of spies and pirates, which will still be interested for us, radio geeks. Yeah, there's always going to be something. And like we were saying a few weeks ago, why not open the shortwave bands to amateur radio operators that would like to operate little radio stations on their own? I'm sure there would be tons of amateur radio operators that'd be glad and really happy to operate low-powered shortwave transmitters, shortwave stations. I'm sure there would. One thing for sure, there was always going to be things on shortwave. I mean, when I'll be 80 years old, if I'm not dead, there's still going to be amateur radio operators all across the frequency ranges. And you know what? I can bet you there's still going to be some pirates, and there's still going to be all sorts of little weird things that we'll hear here and there. So, that's for sure. There's still going to be stuff to listen to. Like Brett Wayne says, tuners are for transmitting, but not really reception. It does help a little bit. So, Alex Canavas says, I think it has to do with which way a country is leaning politically. Right-leaning governments don't seem to support shortwave radio, if I understand it correctly. The Greek liberals reopened ERT. You know what? I'm not sure of that line between right and left wing. I mean, shortwave. So we got to admit it. Shortwave was always used for a form of propaganda broadcasting. Every country in the world that broadcasts, Voice of America will publish its, United States view on things, which is totally normal. It's the voice of the United States. It's the shortwave voice the United States has across the world. Like the BBC will push its, UK views of things. Like Radio Canada International Um, sorry, Radio Canada International pushed its Canadian view on world events. So it's a propaganda tool in part, but you know what? It's partly also what makes it interesting, because I think as a shortwave listener, my view on world events is much different than somebody that just listens to local TV and FM and AM stations and listens to the news given to me by the CBC or with local outlets. Because every time there will be people in other countries that have a different point of view than you have on a world event. And that's quite all right. I mean, if everybody would think the same, I think the Earth would be a very boring place. So, where I'm not really in agreement with your comment is that left-wing politics, right-wing politics, or if you're smack in the middle of politics, you have a point of view and you have something you want to voice. And you know what? Shortwave is there for that. Why not have a voice of your own political ideas? I think it's mostly what's driving the shortwave broadcasters out right now is money. Money is the number one thing, much more than anything else. I mean, look at the 80s. I mean, with the Cold War. I can tell you one thing. Everybody has his point of view. Radio Moscow had the USSR or Russian point of view of things. In Voice of America, it's the other end. Was at the other end with its point of view of things. And I mean, it was even more interesting. I think it was even more interesting back then because of that. Radio Moscow was up to a point interesting to listen to, much more than Voice of Russia. I enjoyed Radio Moscow programs much more than when it was Voice of Russia, when Russia became what it is today. I'm actually very surprised that Putin doesn't have or doesn't want to have its shortwave voice of propaganda of Russia. It's very surprising. I'm amazed that they aren't doing this, or they just feel they don't need to anymore. I don't know. And by the way, my political views and my comments are only my comments, and I never want to offend anybody that has its own political view of his own country. That's something that I want to mention. I'm here to talk general talk, nothing else. Crazy Tom, have you ever owned or operated an in-dash car shortwave radio? I've never even seen somebody that has one, Crazy Tom. Can tell you that. Never seen anyone with one of those here. It seems that it's not popular. Anybody else having a freeze on my video? And Michael Bott, hello there, says there's a big freeze right now. I don't know. I was looking, by the way, on that. I'm interested. It was interesting. I was looking at CNET. CNET was the U.S. tech network, and they were doing a lot because of the Consumer Electronics Show this weekend. They're doing a lot of YouTube Live stuff. And it's very interesting because I tuned in to many of their live shows, and I did see that they do freeze regularly also. So you know what? It made me understand that there's less. It's less of a problem from my end and more of a YouTube thing when it freezes up. SG2 says Cuban Numbers Lady was there a little earlier. So cool. 17480. I don't know if it's there. It's maybe not there anymore, but let's just check it out in case it would be still there. 17480. Yep, still there. The Cuban number lady is there on 17480. S7 here. So I'm hearing the Cuban lady, HM01, Cuban numbers. Yeah, I did see that Pioneer shortwave radio. Does look cool. $139 on eBay. Somebody sent me that link a few months ago when we were talking about car shortwave radios. It does look interesting. Really does look interesting, gotta say. So, hello there, Howard Parker. Nice to have you on board, M0AYO. Pretty cool. Hello there, David Reed. Nice to have you here. And pretty cool. You know, that's the thing, Driver Film Shortwave. That's what I always say. You know what? If and one thing I got to say also is that, you know, we got to stop relying on the internet to do everything. Because the internet has... My internet, you know, the internet connection is dependent on something that shortwave does not have. You can turn off the internet, but you can not turn off shortwave. I can tell you that. You can turn off the internet, but you can't turn off shortwave. You have to remember that shortwave radio is still there. The bands are still there. And you know, if something happens at some point where the internet is censored, I can bet you we'll see popping up shortwave broadcasts from everywhere. Because every world government has an on-off switch for the internet. And I can bet you in a world war, we would be we could be very surprised at what the internet will look like if there would be a world war. And you know, we never wish that. We never wish something like that. But I can tell you that if there's a world war, shortwave broadcasts will pop up everywhere suddenly again, because you can switch off the internet, but you will not be able to switch off shortwave. I can tell you that. Baofeng UVR5. I don't know. What are the frequency ranges of the Baofeng? Let me just check it out here. What's the frequency range? Baofeng UVR5. Yes. There we go. What's the frequency range of these things? I think they're just VHF, UHF radios, right? I do not think they have shortwave in them at all for reception. From what I see here. So, hey Roger Amos from email. Happy New Year, and it's very nice to have you on board. And he's got an ICOM R75 and a Walbrook loop antenna, which unfortunately is indoors, and as I am not allowed to install outside antennas, it does very well nevertheless. The only downside is my neighbor who has a plasma TV, which causes no end of noise, which is a pain in the backside. Yeah. So, hey, take care, Roger. Nice to have you on board. And so sad. Noise is a plague. I'll tell you that. So, yep, I'm still live. For those that you know. Yeah, it's probably something about that, because pretty much when there's a freeze up refresh of the browser, seems to fix the problem. Howard Parker says Moscow was wonderful in its days. CRI dominates the shortwave with its programming. Is awful. It's still better to listen to CRI than to listen to Brother Stare. Gotta say that. But at least, you know. The Vault says, because of money, there's always limited amounts of money, unless you're a super ineffective communist state like the USSR. Yeah. Yep, exactly. They spend money where it gives back much greater benefits, propaganda, TV, and internet. Yep. That is so. That is so. Alex Canova says, I mean, with governments being fiscally conservative, they will say it costs too much. Whether it actually does or not, I could indeed be wrong, and I will understand if you disagree. Oh, but, I disagree, but I do respect all of the comments of everybody, by the way, Alex. But, it's not a place. It's not a place to that they want to invest. Yeah, Scotty Tier 6. Fire Drake tries to turn off shortwave like the Russian jammers from the 80s. But the difference is that the internet, if you switch it off, it's off. A Fire Drake jammer or a USSR noise jammer from the 80s was not that effective. Because of propagation, they still could hear the stations very often. So it's not like, a general on-off switch. James Megawatt, what's your theory on number stations and why they still operate? You know what? That's one thing that I had at some point a discussion with a friend of mine. A friend of mine was telling me that he couldn't understand. I couldn't understand, and is the fact that with the internet and the fact that we have mobile devices that make it so easy to transmit encrypted private messages. And it made me think, why would spies still want to use shortwave for their secret messages, like the Cuban HM01 number? I think everybody's in agreement with one thing, James Megawatt, is that these are spy transmissions. So these are transmissions directed to people that have some instructions of something that they need to do in a specific country. I'm pretty sure there are Cuban spies in the US and there are Cuban spies even here in Canada. I'm pretty sure that's where these broadcasts are going to. Yet, I gotta say, I was thinking the same. Why aren't they on, an encrypted file received through their smartphone or something? And but one thing that I brought up was depending on where you are, and also the fact that it's shortwave, there's no, if you're a spy and you receive that transmission, they arrest you. If you've thrown out that little booklet that, or if you have all that here, you got a shortwave radio on you. It doesn't incriminate you in any way. It's not because you have a shortwave radio that you're a bad guy. And it doesn't mean you're a spy. And I said, the other thing is that anything sent through the internet, even through VPNs, if you really want to, you can trace everything on the internet. You can trace from where it comes from. You can trace from all the points that it went through the internet around the world. And, the guy works in technology, so he kind of looked at me and said, well, I still don't understand. Well, I said, no, I do understand. Sending a secret message through shortwave is probably the best way to send a secret message. Encrypted secret message through a shortwave broadcast. You got a little radio, you receive your transmission, you know what's your orders. And if they arrest you, You got nothing to show that you were a spy. You've got a shortwave radio. So there's I think that's the main idea. That's the main idea. There's nothing bad about that. And yeah. The cat that wants to, with his little eyes that he's just woken up. Come on, DX. Oh yeah, here's DX the cat. Ouch. He put his claws in my leg and it hurts. Here's DX the cat for everybody. Hello there, DX. Hey, DX. Look, DX. Everybody's over there. So DX the cat says hello. And so, there's a fine reason for keeping shortwave spy numbers. And I do think these are spy numbers. That's for sure. That's for sure. PLF says, it reminds me of the last Independence Day movie, which takes place in the near future with eye-level technology. At one point, there's something happening that this technology can be used. The only way to communicate is via shortwave radio. Yeah, like you know what I enjoyed about the first Independence Day movie, by the way? Is the fact that the first Independence Day movie showed that, hey, we can't communicate through nothing anymore, but hey, we're sending out Morse code signals around the world, and that we can still communicate. So it shows you that, we have to, yes, it's fine that our technology brings us at another level, and we're using that to make things faster, better. But what I'm afraid is that we will forget older technology that someday can save your ass, because that technology was simpler to operate, simpler to do something and send a message through it. And, if nobody knows Morse code anymore, I don't know. When Paul was, no, I don't think he becomes invisible. Oh, man. So, well, shortwave transmissions can be triangulated. I'm pretty sure if you take 4 or 5 different stations around the world and they hear HM01, they're going to pretty much pinpoint it comes from Cuba. But mostly is the fact that, you get arrested with a shortwave radio. You have no proof of nothing. You get arrested with your phone. That phone had an IP address to access the web. It had all sorts of things. It might still have in memory or somewhere all sorts of details of the messages you were sending out or receiving. And shortwave radio. Yeah. I just got a radio. Why do you have a radio? Yeah, I listen to the radio. Yeah, nothing wrong there. And that's the thing, Scotty Tier 6, exactly. They couldn't track the source, but never the destination. I mean, that 17480 probably blankets all of North America. Where is it exactly sent to? Nobody knows. Yeah, I would guess so. Also, the vaults, which brings an interesting point. He says the guys who actually know how to operate broadcast shortwave AM transmitters probably mostly retired already these days, at least in many parts of the world. Yeah, a lot of skills are going. Some decades more, and those skills will be completely lost. Yep. It is sad though, because I think keeping knowledgeable people with these all this knowledge of transmitters, shortwave, Morse code, I think can save our ass someday. And even though, I'm a tech guy, I love technology. I love what we're doing with technology up to some point. I still think that older technology can still kick ass if we are in a major problem. Too much reliance on internet is dangerous. The more our civilization will rely on the internet to do things, the more it will be dangerous for our future. Pretty much. Danny Shortwave Radio DX says, I still have my old landline phone in case of emergency. A lot of people don't know that you can dial 911 on any connected phone jack. And it's not the same also. If you dial 911 with a cell phone, they pinpoint approximately where you are. But they have more information of exactly where you are on a connected landline. So, hey, let's get away from this internet thing and start sending out CW. My next live show will be in CW. PLF says shortwave was used during Nepal earthquake in 2015. Yeah. It shows that you need to use shortwave in emergencies. It's something that... A question that I have for you guys, just for the fun of it. Don't you think that even though shortwave broadcasters are going away, don't you think that governments might be still keeping some shortwave transmitters just ready for in case of emergency things? Or do you think these governments, everybody is destroying all the shortwave transmitters once they're not used anymore? That's an interesting question. I would think that if I'd be a wise government guy, a wise government, wow, guys, I'm sorry, but the cat just farted and it's horrible. It smells horrible. I'm sorry. Oh man, DX, please don't do that again. Oh God. Okay. That's I like Vault says wise governments lulls. You are right with that. What was I saying? Wise governments. That's stupid talk. Oh man. Yeah. Febreze. I need some Febreze or something. Lysol, yeah. Oh God. Don't do that again, Paul, please. Oh God. But when I just look here at the the X is driving the transmission. Oh man. Mr. Roman says governments will keep everything they can to be in control. I work as an emergency planner for my county. We have all kinds of ways to communicate, even smoke signals. You know what? I'm not sure the governments have the ways to communicate, and we did see that here. When there was the big ice storm of '98, the only way that governments were able to communicate emergencies around town here and on the south shore of Montreal was by using amateur radio operators, because their own government communications didn't work anymore. So it kind of tells me that the governments are dumb in the way that they think of emergencies and are not prepared at all for a real emergency, and never was and never were, and they will never be. And it's kind of scary when you think about that. If we look here, that Sackville, Canada's transmitter site was kind of, bulldozed away. They just removed everything and let's go. I don't know. Jay Watterson 69, hello. I think I didn't say hi. When you were a kid using Counter 64 or an Apple IIe, did you ever think you would see types of technologies we have in use every day and now take for granted? Look, you know what? When I had my Commodore VIC-20, if you would have told me that I'd be on a worldwide network sending out a show talking about shortwave radio where you see my face around the world, I probably would have told you back then, you're crazy, we're never going to go, that's going to be so far ahead that we're never going to see that. And same thing for cell phones. As a kid, I had walkie-talkies that barely could make 2 corner streets distance. We got cell phones and we're walking around town talking to people, and it's a wireless thing. I never would have thought of anything like that. Never. I can tell you that. Phil Welsh says, so that's a question. I'm to ask an official in Ottawa for a project of mine. Oh, that's interesting. That would be interesting. Well, his bread does smell like cat food when he just ate. But in general, if you didn't just eat, it smells kind of, yeah, okay. I can tell you that. Paul says, when shit really hits the fan, the signal flags will be the only thing working. Yeah. I give DX some Fancy Feast and some Friskies, canned food. Ray Lyle says, hey Joe, what do you like better, tabletop, portable radios, or SDRs? Each has its own cool thing. I like all three. I do have a tendency to like tabletops, like the icon here, more than SDRs, because of the fact that they work on their own. You don't need a computer or anything. SDRs are more flexible and more interesting in many ways. The waterfall of an SDR is amazing. It's so cool to look at. It's so cool to see all these signals in the screen. And portable radios, if I'm not at home, I need a tabletop here at home. In my home, tabletop rules. But if I'm outside, a portable radio is great. My Texan PL 680, I won't go anywhere without it. I can tell you that. Rich Hill says the DX the cat just gave you his comment on wise governments. Yep, that's probably it. Alex Canavas says, I think it will be like it was in World War II. Yeah, where they take over the privately owned broadcasters and decide that they use that to broadcast. Yeah, it could be. Scotty Tier 6 says, I'd like to see them tap into my 2 tin cans and string comms. Well, with today's technology, I think that, you know what, Scotty Tier 6, they'll be able to detect the vibrations of that little string and make the voice back. Danny Shortwave in Radio DX says, Hurricane Katrina was a great example. Can't rely on government for help. And a major issue, I don't think any of our governments are ready to help. Not the US government, not the Canadian government, no government in the world is ready for the real big disaster. And that every time it happens, it's always the same. It's always, they don't know what to do. They aren't operating efficiently. And you know what? It's in part because a lot of the old stuff, oh, that's not needed anymore. Oh, yeah. Well, maybe it is. You don't know. It's just amazing. But I can tell you, in a very big disaster, I think all of us are screwed. Whatever country we live in, we're all screwed because governments in a very big disaster are never efficient and never good at what's happening. Mr. Roman says it all depends. Here in the USA, we move from civil defense programs to what is called Homeland Security under FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And he says we have what is called NIMS, okay, the National Incident Management System, standardized approach to incident management developed by the United States Department of Homeland Security. You know what, Mr. Roman, and there's no offense on what I'm going to say. When I hear these words and these management systems and these, you know what, I just understand one thing: why we are screwed when the government needs to help us. We got to stop always using these words and saying standardized equipment or something, or standardized way of helping, or, you know what? I am still under the, I'm going to be harsh here, I'm still under the impact that we're always run by idiots that don't know the hell they're doing. And I understand that there's a lot of help and there's a lot of, different organizations. But when I start hearing these words of standardized approach to something, I'm sorry, but that's what's wrong in all of our countries around the world. I'm sorry. I gotta tell you that. Same for me, driver film shortwave. He's got it. If it all goes up, I want to be drunk and directly underneath it. Yep. They're telling me that in an hour, an atomic weapon is going to be dropped on Montreal. I'm taking out a bottle of vodka. I'm drinking like hell, thinking of, I want to be there with some of the people I love, though. Maybe like meeting with a few people. Hey, let's meet right now. And if I can't, because it's just too sudden, well, I'll be drinking vodka alone, thinking of how shortwave was great, how I had a lot of fun with you guys until that bomb explodes. So, I don't know. Maybe that's it, Valts. We need a proper tabletop SDR. I would not say no to that. A tabletop SDR, yes, with a nice little screen for the watermark, the watermark. So for that waterfall and everything. Yes, I agree, Valts. We're in agreement today. Yeah, I know you're an emergency planner and everything, so And by the way, Mr. Roman, I do not want to offend you in any way. Okay, I think that for most people, everybody's doing a great job and doing the best they can. It's just that the tools and the way that it's brought in is sometimes deficient. It's not correct. So, you're going to make me happy, Mr. Roman, if you tell me that they have hundreds of feet of wires to do antennas and that they have tube radios and tube transceivers to have, that you'll hook up to these, and somebody knows how to tune those to transmit and receive. And now I'll know that they're doing something right. Yep, David, that's what I was talking a little earlier. Norway wants to shut down analog FM, even though 66% of the population is against it. That 66% and even more will never buy a new radio. Like I was saying, That's also true. Like Walt says, unrealistic to have enough materials to handle large disasters. That is true. That is true. Yeah, the Quebec Carnival is February. Can you believe I've never been to the Quebec Carnival? Here we have what we call is the Quebec City, because we have Quebec, the province, but we also have Quebec City, and it's a winter carnival here, for those that don't know. Ray Lyle says, ICOM, IC 9500 would be great to have, but 14,000 to get one. Yeah. Scotty TR6 has one. Hey, take care, Driver Films 73. Always cool. No, here I'm still thinking of the 1998. Have they learned something? That I'd like to know. Also, one thing, have they learned something in the 1998 ice storm here? At some point, they had to rely on amateur radio operators, which were the only ones that could operate when there's no power. Surprise, surprise. And you would think that all of these government agencies could still use the airwaves in an emergency, and it seems that no, it's not. So I gotta say, did they learn anything? Did they learn anything? With all of that, I don't know. I'm not sure. I can bet you if we had a big ice storm like we had in '98 today, we'd still be in the same trouble. And we guys, you know what? All of we watching and me doing this show, we are going to be the guys that are going to be really useful in emergencies, because we're going to be the ones that still know how to operate technology that can still be extremely useful if something happens. Mr. Roman says, I fully understand your feelings about it. Just so you know, this can be only implemented if local government requests it, or if it's declared by the president. Have you ever been in just by curiosity, Mr. Roman, have you ever been in an emergency situation that, and see how it's going? And, what's your take on it? How well does it go? Do you think there's, shortcomings, or you think, Now, one thing, of course, is, I do think that everybody in an emergency situation probably is doing its best. It's just that I think it's not well implemented, and it's not well thought out with all the possibilities. Hey, everybody, go and subscribe to the Scotty Tier 6 YouTube channel. He's got some nice videos with his ICOM ICR 9500. Hey, take care. Cheers, Crazy Tom. It was nice to have you here. Oh, no, sorry. Crazy Tom was not leaving. I'm wrong. Driver Films was leaving. Bye, PLF. Always nice to have you on board. And Crazy Tom says there was a massive snow and ice storm in New England December 96. While it was snowing, icing, there was thunder and lightning too. Yeah. Here, January of 98 will always be remembered. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. If you guys could have seen that a little piece of wire, a really small piece of wire, could become this big in ice, that was amazing. Yeah, I'm still on, John Rinson. I'm still on. Ray Lyle says, this dates me, but I still have my CB radio when I was a kid. Keep it. You know what? I can bet you our CB radios will save our lives. How do we communicate? CB radio. Mr. Roman says, the reason for standardization is because all groups, police, use different kind of lingos and frequencies when they communicate, when you try to manage and coordinate. Yeah, that I understand. It's true that every organization has its own communication system, has its own way of doing things, and it's true that everybody should be on the same level and use or be able or be capable of using the same frequencies and the same way of communicating. And that I fully agree that there should be that. But man, it never seems to work well for some reason. Rich Hill says, I have both the 98 ice storm in Watertown, New York, and the World Trade Center rescue worker. 9/11, Ground Zero was total anarchy for first month. Yep. I can bet. I remember that 9/11 day. I can tell you that. I remember I was going to do some promotion for my business. And I barely, I woke up at 8 a.m. And as I was going to go outside, I got a call from my mom telling me, hey, are you watching TV? Something is happening in New York. And I remember that I turned on the TV just to look, and I saw that one of the towers had smoke coming out. And I sat down because I was like, wow, this is major. And as I was watching the live feed on TV, the second plane arrived. And that's when I just told myself, I remember I was sitting in the living room and I told myself, okay, that's major. I'm not doing anything today. I'm sitting here and watching this. There's something major is happening right now. And the first plane, everybody was kind of, well, an accident. I remember telling myself, how could a major plane like that go into a tower? I wasn't sure that, for me it was an accident even with the first plane. But when I saw the second plane, it was like, now that was really obvious that, okay, something bad's happening right now. And I remember sitting down and watching that the whole morning and having that weird feeling. I don't know if you guys had that for all of those that watched. I had that weird feeling. It was so intense. I don't know if it's because it was so intense, but I had that weird feeling inside, watching the whole morning and then seeing the towers collapse, and just thinking how people can do such horrible things, And I remember I felt it felt so weird. It felt so weird. And all the morning I was watching that and it felt so weird. And thinking of all the people that probably died when that happened and everything. Incredible events. Let's hope that Mr. Roman says I can find out for you about the wires. No problem, Ron Rinson. I'm going to do a schedule, and I'm going to do a Word or a PDF document that I'll post and send to everybody, and we'll have all the dates of our meetups, like every month or every 2 months at a time, so everybody knows when it's live or not. Brett Wayne says, I still have an MKV DAC 40 channel CB. Wow. That's the problem. Rich Hill says no one was in charge. Every department and agency did their own thing. That is the major problem in an emergency. Every department cannot do his own thing. Everybody needs to get together, and that's the biggest problem. FOH says, I just received my R9012 and Sanjian emergency radio. Been looking for my old CB. Cool. Mark Brando, as you mentioned, too dependent on the internet. I also think if satellites are hacked, even more communications and entertainment problems. Yep, keep your CBs, Mark Brando. And by the way, Mark, thanks for the donation. Really nice. Bobby Burgess says, I was in 7th grade when 9/11 happened. Brett Wayne was 9/11 was only radio only, no phones. Philip Briggs says, many flights were divided together during a 9/11, I understand. Yeah. Yes, that was one of the issues because no flights, they had stopped all the flights. They grounded everything. In the United States, you were not allowed to fly a plane anymore. And here in Canada, it was a hell of a problem. Even here in Montreal, a ton of planes suddenly arrived in Montreal because they just couldn't go in the United States anymore. There was a lot of traffic, a lot of stuff. Gerald says he was listening to Shortwave during 9/11. Activity on the radio was crazy. Every band had activity, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I will, Bobby Burgess. I'll do a PDF with the schedules. Not just with the radio shows, but all the live shows that I do. So you guys can see. And also post the link to what channel I'm doing the show on. David says, yeah, they had to use a runway to park the aircraft in. There was, as there wasn't enough space on the platform. Yep. You know, Mr. Roman, I was not criticizing anything in the work that you guys do. Um, I think you probably do understand how we feel about different things with that. And you probably also have yourself seen an event and thought of why is it not working well. But still, I think one of the things for sure, we are all extremely happy and think that, um, it's great that, people like you are there in emergency situations. And that's mostly what I have to say here. Brett Wayne says, I live in Western New York, 9/11, we took all day and took a day off and watched TV all day. Yep. The K2 says, it was a very weird couple of days with no planes in the air. I was in Seattle at the time and the flight path goes right by downtown. It was eerie, the skies were empty. Danny Shortwave Radio DX says, I wasn't hired by a tech company for a webmaster position on the World Trade Center a few months before 9/11, and my wife was laid off for another company also. Talk about us being lucky. Yeah, sometimes wonder if there's something more that helps us. Sir Roman says, I understand 100%. And, that's what I like, Mr. Roman, is a healthy talk about what we all think about different things and how we can, I'm the kind of guy that still agrees. I hate people that will take my comments or think that I'm stupid or, anything. I like constructive comments where I can talk to somebody. And like we're talking now. And, not belittle anyone and not think that somebody's stupid or dumb or anything because of its position on something or where he lives or what's happening. I think we're all entitled to be polite with each other. And that's a great way. JST300C says, I'd like to watch some of your Windows live show, but don't know where or when. Yeah, I'll release a PDF. Learn Windows 10 and computers. The channel name exactly is the official Windows 8. But that's where it's happening. So, Gerald says, Nora did a training exercise the week before for the exact scenario, planes crashing at Twin Towers. Everything was on the towers. There was even radio and TV broadcast stuff on those towers. Mr. Rowan says, no from here. I'm a grown 42-year-old man from Spanish Caribbean island. We share opinions about everything 100% of the day. Very complex. You know what? I don't think you can prevent anything. Bobby Burgess says, would have 9/11 been prevented? You know what? I think we have to brace ourselves about one thing. I think you're a fool if you think that we can prevent future 9/11 style events. Yes, there's a lot of things we can do to try to prevent the maximum things that is possible. But you know what? I think that whatever we do, there will always be that guy that hates somebody else enough and that has enough intelligence. And when I'm calling intelligence, I don't mean about the actions they're going to do because that's dumb. But I mean the intelligence of thinking of the way to do it to not get caught. And I think it will never be possible to prevent anything like a 9/11 of the future to happen. I think if you think you can prevent something like that, you're not in the real world. You're really not in the real world. Here, Crazy Tom in the South Shore of Montreal, the 1998 ice storm. They didn't have power for a month. They had to reconstruct a special power line just to get the power back there. It was crazy. That's the more scary thing, like Scotty TR6 says. You can't stop someone that is willing to die to hurt you. Just look at the Second World War, these kamikaze from Japan. The kamikaze from Japan. You know, anybody that is ready to die to hurt somebody, it's a losing war. Because he'll just do what he needs to do. And if he dies doing it, that's what he wants, you know? Yeah. But you know, the bombing of the World Trade Center in the first place was an internal issue, not even an external terrorism issue. It was an internal issue. You know, we all have in our own countries crazy guys and girls that want to do bad stuff. Well, it's not necessarily, you know, Vault, it's not necessarily a minor issue, terrorism, but it's something that, yes, is taking too much place. It's taking too much place in the way we do things. You know, we're going to lose our privacy, our civil liberties because of that, because somebody somewhere thinks that if he spies on our communications, he's going to prevent the big one, which is not at all the case. That's why I'm not happy, and I don't think we should lose our privacy on the internet, because it will not prevent something bad from happening. I can tell you that. I do not record my shortwave listening, except in a special way in my YouTube videos. But I used to have, in the 80s, I used to have tapes of, you know, shortwave broadcasts. You know, in general, I just don't want to have to lose my privacy in exchange for the hyped up, because, you know, governments are good at hyping something to a level that is much higher than reality. And yes, we have to be careful. Yes, terrorism exists. We just got to say one thing, is that if something has to happen, it's going to happen. And I'm sick and I'm personally sick and tired of, we have to lose our privacy in order to be safe, which is something that I do not agree upon at all, and I don't think it changes anything. Because every time you hide security, or you prevent our privacy from working, well, these guys are going to find another way of communicating and doing what they want. The less freedom we have, exactly, Brett Wayne has a great comment here. If we give up freedom, they win. Exactly. And that's the problem. We're going to live in a paranoid state or in a freedom state. I remember telling my brother, you know what, here in Canada we had a fantastic case of a guy that came that was suspected of terrorism. And he had an ankle bracelet that is detectable. So everywhere he went, we always knew where he was. And the court, Supreme Court here in Canada, said you can't do that on suspicion that he's a terrorist. And they had to remove that ankle bracelet. And my brother told me, Oh, you see that decision? They removed the ankle bracelet. And I said, I told my brother, I said, you cannot, just because you suspect that somebody did something, remove his liberty, his privacy. Because a lot of people have been suspected of things that they never did. And I told my brother, you know what? The price for freedom means that, yeah, unfortunately, somebody somewhere someday will get killed. But I'd rather take that risk, even if it's I'm the one who's going to be killed, than to live in a state of where, you know, everything is closed down and freedom doesn't exist anymore. That's all I got to say. But it's a very complex thing. You know, every time I talk about this, somebody will post to me, oh, that's because you never had a loved one killed in an event, or we got to be careful about our own personal feelings of something and the reality of the real world we live in, and how we got to stay you know, we got to stay open-minded. We got to stay free and never give up our privacy because of hysteria coming from the media, coming from the governments. And on these words, I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to close down the show, 3 hours, 37 minutes, because I'm probably about to run out of batteries. Thank you all for being here. It was a really cool show tonight. Talked about shortwave, propagation, solar cycle, and a great discussion at the end of, you know, how we feel about everything. It's just extremely cool. Thanks, everybody, because it's extremely cool to have all of you here. Without you guys, the show wouldn't exist. Thanks for everyone. Take care. And the next radio show is next Friday. Friday will be the 13th, Friday the 13th, and we'll have the VHF UHF show, or the wideband show. Take care, everybody. Thanks for being here. Hope you had fun tonight. And take care, all. Bye-bye.